Yeah. Labas rytas.
Good morning. I will start speaking in Lithuanian. And then I will briefly welcome the participants joining us from foreign states. I welcome everyone.
Vakarų Balkanų šalys,
Ladies and gentlemen, participants of the conference Western Balkan countries on the path to the EU 2022. So this is the second conference in this context. We would like to have this as an annual conference. Until 2020, Lithuanian foreign policy priorities did not include the Balkan region, the Western Balkan region. In terms of the strategic importance of this region to the entire Europe, I'm very glad that the current government and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs sees the significance of this region and puts a great focus on it. In this day's conference, we will be joined by representatives from at least 5 countries from the Western Balkans. I'm very happy to see the special rapporteur for Belgrade and Pristina dialogue in the European Union, Mr. Miroslav Lajčák, you special representative for the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue and Western Balkans. I'm very glad that the colleagues from the from the Seimas Committee on Foreign Affairs have also joined us at this conference. Actually, 3 important events have coincided today. And now, I don't want to take too much of your time, and I would like to give the floor to the Speaker of the Seimas, Viktorija Čmilytė-Nilsen. But before that, I would like to say a few words to the participants of the conference who will join our conference remotely.
Who will be joining us online. Thank you very much for agreeing to participate in our conference, which is our second annual conference on Western Balkan countries on the path to the EU. There will be some changes in our program, so just stay with us online as much as you can in order to intervene when your time comes. And now I would like to introduce the Speaker of our Seimas, the Parliament of Lithuania, Ms. Viktorija Čmilytė-Nilsen. The floor is yours, Madam Speaker.
Dėkoju, gerbiama pirmininkė, gerbiama.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Colleagues, members of the Seimas, Excellencies, ambassadors, honorable guests. Welcome to the conference on the integration of the Western Balkan countries into the European Union. I would like to thank the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the Seimas, and in particular, Laima Liucija Andrikienė, chair of this committee and head of the Seimas Group for Interparliamentary Relations with the Western Balkan countries, for her initiative to keep the issue of integration of the Western Balkan countries on the political agenda in Lithuania and other EU member states. The countries and citizens of the Western Balkans have been waiting for almost 20 years to become members of the European Union. Quite recently, many thought that the EU had exhausted its enlargement opportunities, at least for the nearest future to come. But the sound of the Russian missiles exploding in Ukrainian cities once again became a wake-up call for many in Europe to rethink the so-called halting policy. Lithuania's opinion is clear. In the context of Russia's war against Ukraine, as well as in the light of Moscow's efforts to increase its influence in the region and to destroy its balance, the enlargement process of the European Union in the Western Balkans must gain greater momentum rather than stop. I welcome the eventual opening of the EU negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania following so many years, and appreciate the great efforts made by the French presidency of the European Union to help find a compromise solution acceptable to North Macedonia and Bulgaria. I look forward to Montenegro making quicker steps towards the European integration. The enlargement of the EU must cover the entire Western Balkan region. As you may know, Lithuania has consistently advocated for the enlargement process of the European Union to the Western Balkans and will continue its efforts to prevent it from being stuck. This is not only about the future of the Western Balkans, but also of the credibility of the EU. The credibility of the EU and the general solidarity and functioning of democracies in general are crucial in these challenging times. Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine is directed not only against it, but against the EU as a whole and the entire democratic world. The Kremlin regime does not act alone. It is almost certain that the great authoritarian powers will seek to consolidate their efforts to challenge the rules-based world order and challenge Western security architecture. The Western Balkans, like the Eastern Partnership countries, have already become a ground for this aggressive, anti-democratic effort directed against regional integration into European and Euro-Atlantic structures. To avoid the delay, we must work together to find resilience to the current and future crises by reducing our dependence on hostile, unstable regimes. The enlargement of the EU and the implementation of the necessary changes in the accession process are an essential component of these efforts. However, great responsibility lies not only on EU's shoulders, but also on the countries of the region themselves. For all the weaknesses, delayed reforms, internal and mutual disagreements will be used against them. Moreover, as a rule, enlargement of the EU takes place mainly in waves, implying that accession countries are interlinked, especially if they are part of a single region. It is therefore essential that the Western Balkan countries ensure good neighborly relations and regional cooperation. In resolving disagreements, it is more important than ever that all parties engage in constructive dialogue and avoid unilateral action. Russia's war in Ukraine has also revealed the link between the Western Balkans and the Eastern Partnership countries in the EU enlargement process. Even before the war, Lithuania repeatedly stressed that the development processes should be seen as complementary exercise rather than competition. After all, a new impetus has been given to Albania and North Macedonia's EU accession process by the political will to grant the EU candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova as a result of the European Union's response to Russian aggression. I therefore believe that better cooperation and coordination between the Western Balkans, Ukraine and Moldova would help to ensure the continuity and sustainability of the enlargement of the European Union. Ukraine now in particular needs all our support, and we expect full solidarity from the Western Balkan countries that are seeking EU membership. The countries applying for EU membership must adhere to the common foreign and security policy of the European Union, and the country's position on sanctions against Russia and support to Ukraine serves as a litmus test for this policy. To conclude, I would like to support the argument of the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, made in her annual report this week on the need to invest in the power of democracy. As she noted well, the path towards strong democracies and the path towards our union are one and the same. This is why the enlargement of the EU to the Western Balkans and the Eastern Partnership countries will help to expand the core of democracy. I hope that the path towards the EU membership will be as short and smooth as possible for the people of the Western Balkans, as well as Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia. Lithuania will be your reliable partner and ally on this path. Thank you for your attention.
Ačiū pirmininkė.
Thank you, Speaker.
Madam Speaker. for your welcoming address. And now we have on the program the video address of the President of Kosovo. Unfortunately, due to the changes in her agenda, she had to go to London, so we will not have her address today. And Pavel Fischer, our next speaker, he will be joining us, but a bit later. So I would like to invite now for the keynote speech, Ms. Jovita Neliupšienė, the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania. The floor is yours.
Dear honorable guests here in our national parliament, Seimas, and as well all the colleagues around Europe, around our continent. I'm really pleased to join the conference, and thank you, Madam Andrikene, for inviting Speaker of the Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. Pernai surengta konferencija skirta Vakarų Balkanų.
The International Conference on the Western Balkans, held last year in the Lithuanian Parliament, took place in a completely different context. Unfortunately, Russia's war against Ukraine has changed the security situation in Europe and encourages us to review our usual policies and actions today. I'm delighted that most of the Western Balkan countries have strongly opposed Moscow's aggression and strongly supported Ukraine. Joining the EU's common foreign and security policy and the sanctions imposed by the EU against Russia and Belarus demonstrate our common sense and value community. Unity strengthens us. This is very important. We see some countries reluctant to fully join the EU's CFSF and sanction regime, but we very much hope that these countries will take the right side eventually. The countries of the Western Balkans, which have suffered violent wars, are well aware of the value of peace, the pain and experiences currently suffered by Ukrainians. We greatly appreciate the assistance and solidarity of the Western Balkan countries with Ukraine. We need to help Ukraine to stand for victory, because this is the victory of all of us. No fatigue, no discontinuation of support to Ukraine, including military support, can and must not occur. We are also helping to defend the existence of a free world in Ukraine, and this is why our forces and efforts must be focused in that direction. I would like to mention separately the North Macedonia, which deserves special respect for the assistance to Ukraine and is a role model for all of us. Lithuania has always strongly supported the merit-based EU enlargement policy. We believe that enlargement is the best stabilizing factor for the EU. I am glad that in the recent years we have seen a positive dynamics in this field. As our speaker mentioned, we are on the positive wave. And we are delighted with the EU's negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania, which have finally started. We appreciate the great efforts made by the French presidency to help find a compromise solution acceptable to North Macedonia and Bulgaria. Serbia opened a new Chapter 4 group in talks with the EU in December last year. I hope that Montenegro, which is the most advanced in the negotiations, will focus on a more active negotiation process. And we will also strive for a visa-free regime for Kosovo. We sincerely encourage all partners to continue with the most important reforms that will unquestionably and significantly contribute to achieving the desired results. In this regard, I would like to draw attention to the words of the President of the European Commission the day before yesterday. We should strive to expand the core of democracy, because the path to a strong democracy and the path to our union is the same. Other challenges in the region, such as the renewed tensions at the Serbian-Kosovo border, the destructive actions of some politicians in Bosnia and Herzegovina, to whom we sincerely wish to hold free and fair elections in October and to ensure the formation of authorities at all levels, are also worrying. We call on Belgrade and Pristina to return to the negotiating table and to continue the dialogue effectively. We believe that it is only on the basis of mutual understanding and bilateral respect that we should expect sustainable and long-term agreements that will allow us to look forward towards the common future in Europe. In the current context, I simply cannot imagine the EU candidate country that further develops military ties with the aggressor country, Russia. The continuation of such cooperation would cross the red lines. Some of the things that were hard but tolerated yesterday are beyond tolerance today. I would also like to draw the attention of the conference participants to China. Beijing's support for Moscow in the war against Ukraine, Beijing's unprecedented economic pressure on Lithuania shows that it is not a valuable partner with whom it is worth developing close ties. Congratulations to Estonia and Latvia on their decision to withdraw from the 16+1 format. We also call on the Western Balkan countries to think about the expediency and usefulness of this format, because all our weaknesses, where we are open to non-democratic forces, will be used against us. The past COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing energy crisis show that only collectively, together with the EU, we can effectively tackle the challenges we face. We call on all countries that continue their energy cooperation with Moscow to reconsider these ties. The money paid to Russia is used for missiles against the Ukrainian people. We call on the Western Balkan partners to look for alternative energy supply routes and to focus on renewable energy. Together, we must seek resilience to current and future crises by reducing dependence on hostile regimes. In conclusion, I hope that the countries of the Western Balkans will be firmly on the European path of peace and prosperity. We want to see you in a common European family as close friends and like-minded people. Finally, I will repeat the words of Ursula von der Leyen for the people of the Western Balkans. You are part of our family. Your future is in our union, and our union is not complete without you. Thank you.
Ačiū labai. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Madam Vice Minister, for your keynote speech and for presenting a very clear position of Lithuania, where we are on EU policies towards Western Balkans region. I see that my dear colleague, Honorable Pavel Fischer, is with us. Hello, nice to see you. And now I would like to introduce to the conference Pavel Fischer, the chairperson of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defense and Security of the Senate of the Czech Republic, who also today represents the Czech presidency of the EU. Dear Mr. Fischer, the floor is yours. Please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I am pleased to be with you this morning and to speak about the perspective for Western Balkans. All the societies in Western Balkans need to have a credible perspective of cooperation based on the rule of law, based on the citizenship principles, based on the recognition that together we can shape our future, but we shouldn't go back to the traps of the past. All our countries were in the past years exposed to a huge crisis. I mean, pandemic crisis of COVID-19, and today the war which is back in European soil, and I speak about the Russian aggression against Ukraine. During the pandemic already, we saw that in Western Balkans, since they didn't receive quickly enough, timely enough, the help of the European Union, this gap was a kind of invitation for Russia and for China trying to propose their own vaccines and solutions. And this influence operations based on the fight with pandemic became a real example how vulnerable our societies might be in times of deep crisis such as world pandemic. Today we live in another challenging time with this aggression that Russia sparked against not only Ukraine but the whole European space, because the energy is at stake, the very social benefits of our population, of our societies, or social peace is at stake today with the skyrocketing prices and very high inflation. This is not only an issue which is important for European countries, I mean within the European Union, but also in Western Balkans. And this is the reason why we have to speak about project ties and very concrete steps how to anchor Western Balkans with the European Union. Last but not least, after the Second World War, it was the transatlantic space which was of crucial importance for our security. Today, similarly, the focus has to be also on Indo-Pacific, because there the community of democracies, rule of law-based societies, and our allies are challenged by the superpower of China, Communist China. This week, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping met and spoke both about Ukraine and Taiwan. And this is something that we have to be aware of. The war in Ukraine is something that Russia wants to be backed by China, and with Taiwan, Communist China wants to be backed by Putinist Russia. And this is the reason why we have to understand that all the steps China or Russia proposes to Western Balkans are prepared in this broader framework. So thank you very much, dear colleagues, for inviting me to be with you this morning. We need to speak about Western Balkans. We need to speak about ourselves. And bravo for Lithuania for organizing this event. And thank you for the leadership, because together with Estonia and Latvia, you succeeded to pave the way for us who are still members of this format 16+1, together 14+1. I really wish that Czech Republic is the next, and I work in this regard in Prague. Thank you very much for your leadership, and I wish you all the success for today's session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Chairman. Thank you very much, dear Pavel, for your participation and for your speech. Thank you. And now we move to our session 1, which is Western Balkans status quo and key challenges. And our first speaker is Mr. Davor Ivo Stier, member of the Croatian Parliament, member of its Foreign Affairs Committee, and also head of the Interparliamentary Friendship Group, Croatia-Lithuania, former Foreign Minister of Croatia and my former colleague in the European Parliament. Davor, I would like to invite you here and I would be happy to give you the floor. Yes, please. Please.
Thank you, Laima, very much for your hospitality, for the invitation. Mr. Deputy Minister, dear Emanuelis, dear colleagues, I'm very glad to be here today with you. Last year we have, on the last conference that you organized, I could participate, but only via Zoom. I promised at that time that we'll try to be here present on this occasion. I'm glad that I could have done it together with my colleague Erik Fabijanic from the Croatian Parliament. Now, the title of this block is about the enlargement of the European Union to the Western Balkans, status quo and key challenges. And immediately I will address the issue of the status quo, and I believe that is unacceptable. We cannot just keep doing things as it is business as usual. Why? Because the world is changing. It has already changed. It was changing already for a while, but definitely February 24th was a turning point that we will probably then in history books remember as such, as a date that was seen as a turning point, where a new order in the world, and therefore also in Europe, is somehow developing. And where we need to defend an order and an architecture, a peace architecture for the future of Europe that will be based on democratic principles, where we cannot tolerate autocracies, we cannot tolerate aggression, we can confront them. And that's why it's a world order and a European order that is changing, and that requires that we also change and adapt the mechanisms that we were having so far, including, of course, our policy of enlargement, which was, as you know here in Lithuania, as we know in Croatia, a very successful policy of the European Union, and that was in a way based, and the way it was structured, it was based on the idea of a Europe whole and free. That was the paradigm after the fall of the Berlin Wall, to have really such a Europe. Now, that is challenged today. And unfortunately, I have to say, the ideas that we came to the end of history proved not to be true. That history is here with us with all the consequences of that. That unfortunately, geopolitics in the old-fashioned way is something that we cannot neglect anymore. And that is what is bringing us to the conclusion that status quo as such is not something that we can accept at this moment, that we need to change. We have three key, if you want to talk about geopolitics, geopolitical actors that are and will be shaping the balance in this area. Of course, the European Union here is representing the Western democracies, the global West, if you want. The European Union, with the support and the security guarantees provided through NATO by our American allies. This is the West. Now, we are confronting an autocratic regime in Moscow. We are confronting a Russia that is not anymore the Soviet Union, but it continues to have an imperial attitude. It continues to have this geopolitical concept of a Russian world, the so-called Russian world, yeah? A sphere of influence. So not a Europe whole and free, as we were all advocating after the fall of the Berlin Wall, but a different concept, a different geopolitical concept. And we have to acknowledge as well that we have Turkey, as a geopolitical actor as well, is our ally in NATO, but it has developing under President Erdogan also more and more an anti-Western attitude. And this is something that we also need to take into consideration. So all these three actors somehow are interacting, and of course, when we are talking and we are talking about the enlargement policy of the EU, we need to take this into account. So let me go very fast now to the second point in the title of this roundtable, and that is key challenges. So if we establish that status quo is not something that we can accept any longer, what are the challenges to that? Well, the first challenge, and I think that the speaker of the Lithuanian parliament said that very clearly, is the strategic alignment. In this new world, in this new situation that we are all facing, it's obvious that we are expecting countries that want to join the EU that will be very clear on their strategic alignment. Now, I know that a lot of focus have been put on the alignment of Serbia in particular with regards to the sanctions against Russia. And it's not just an issue that has been brought by Lithuania or by, it's really a common position of the European Union. But it's not just about Serbia. I think it has to be for every candidate country the same. So we have the situations in all candidate or aspirant countries that would like to have a candidate status in the Western Balkans to have a very clear alignment. If we have now really, in this sense, a confrontations of concepts of if you want to join the European Union, then you are joining also the West. If you're joining the West, you have to be clear that you need to be sharing the strategic positions of the West, the values of the West, and also, in this sense, to join the regime of sanctions against the Russian Federation because of the aggression against the Ukraine. Yes, as I mentioned, we have also a situation with Turkey that is a NATO ally, that on some issues is really having a protagonistic role even in the Black Sea basin, but that is having also some other attitudes. And I will mention now, for example, just a few days ago, President Erdogan visited Sarajevo and visited Belgrade and sent he also visited Croatia after that. It sends very, very anti-Western messages, saying or portraying the West as a force that is against Muslims, which is certainly not the case. And I think it was not a good message. And so when it comes to the strategic alignment, of course, when it comes to these issues, we expect all the countries in the Western Balkans to be aligned with the Western values, with the strategic and foreign and security objectives of the European Union and of the West in general. Now, that of course implies also to do all the other things that we know about the enlargement mechanism, about reforms, about freedom of media, about independence of judiciary, about combating corruption. And this is true not only for countries that are in the process of acceding to the European Union. This is something that we should be very well aware is a constant obligation also of member states. So it's something that we need to care also within the European Union, and we are aware of that. Now, there is also another issue that it was mentioned before, and that is when it comes to the challenges, this new situation is also a challenge for the EU. So we need to be serious and credible in our commitment to the enlargement process. So if we are asking strategic alignment, if we are asking reforms to candidate countries, we also need to be prepared to deliver that if the conditions are met, that enlargement will really happen. So that is also the challenges and the obligations are not only on one side, but it should be on both sides. Yeah? Now, it's true that especially populist forces within the EU were against or very, very skeptical about enlargement. And it's true that that is changing sometimes the political map in certain key members of the European Union, and that enlargement somehow has been for a while put at the margins, sidelined, and that it was not an issue that was brought to the public debate because there was a fear that with that politicians would lose public support or would lose elections, so somehow there was an internal dynamic and a fatigue about enlargement. But this new situation, after the Russian aggression against Ukraine, were things that were not probably imaginable a few years ago. For example, that Ukraine will be granted status of candidate, now it's a reality. And that is telling us that we also need to change the approach to the Western Balkans with a more serious commitment. The Western Balkans were promised already in Thessaloniki the perspective of EU membership, but we need to have a stronger commitment. Now, we know that it's not something that is going to happen overnight, because of many aspects, including the aspect of the strategic alignment of the candidates, but there are certain things that probably we can move faster. And I will just give a few examples, and of course we'll stop there and be open to the Q&A session afterwards if there are questions. I think that when we see, for example, a certain fatigue in terms of enlarging the EU to the political institutions, we should not be afraid of enlarging the EU to societies and to see that the citizens in the countries in the Western Balkans will not suffer the difference of being in a country that is not yet a member of the EU, but we will reduce that difference, and we can do it relatively quickly. One example is the free roaming area. We know that some countries in the Western Balkans are eliminating roaming costs among them. That is good news. It's a form of regional cooperation. But why should be the case that the citizen in Serbia can, without roaming fees, call somebody in Albania or in Northern Macedonia, but he has to pay fees if he wants to call Vilnius or Zagreb or Munich or Rome? So why don't we do not integrate this area to the European single market so that there is no free roaming, that there is a free roaming area in the whole European Union, including the Western Balkans. I'm very glad that, for example, that is now an idea that the European Commission is promoting also for Ukraine. And I think that this is exactly the things that we need to do. And that is a way how we are enlarging already the EU and the benefits of the EU and the European single market to the citizens in countries that are still not formally members of the EU, but can already benefit from the free movement of people, of capital, of services, of goods. So the four basic freedoms of the EU. There is, in that sense, something that we can move faster, and I think that it will help us to integrate faster the societies, and of course, after that, we expect also the political institutions to follow. But we are giving that, in that sense, I think, a very clear message that indeed, as the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said in Strasbourg at the State of the European Union address, that Europe is not complete without the countries in the Western Balkans. With that, I would like, dear Laima, dear colleagues, to finish my introductory remarks and again be open to all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Davor. And yes, I would like to remind the participants, those who are online and those who are present here in Vilnius, that in about 20 minutes we will have Q&A. And please send me, your questions. That is, my message to those who are who will be joining us online. And give me a sign if you would like to ask for those who are here. Okay, I see my dear colleague, Ms. Mimi Kodeli, the chairperson of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Albanian Parliament. Madam Kodeli, welcome. Thank you for participating in our conference, and the floor is yours. Please.
Good morning to all of you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Dear friends, I'd like to start my intervention by something that most of you are certainly aware of. Recently, my country became the target of two consecutive heavy cyber attacks on digital infrastructure in a bid to destroy it, paralyze public services, and hack data and electronic communication from the government systems. The in-depth investigation provided us with some indisputable evidence that the cyber attack against our country was orchestrated and sponsored by the Islamic Republic of Iran through the engagement of 4 groups that enacted the aggression, one of them being a notorious international cyber terrorist group. The good news, however, is that we know what to do and how to do to prevent anyone from harming us. Also because we have the right partners on our side, and in that situation, our allies, the US, NATO member countries, and other partners have been standing firmly and actively by us. So without them, we wouldn't make it in a fast and in an efficient way. We did it. Following such malicious cyber activities, designing to destabilize and harm the security of our country and disrupt the daily lives of our citizens, NATO is standing in solidarity with Albania as an ally, ready to defend against and counter the full spectrum of cyber threats, including by considering possible collective responses. I started by recalling this situation in Albania, right, because we all know and agree on the danger of the transboundary effects of these threats, these kind of threats, resulting from interdependencies between interconnection societies and countries. Albania is a NATO member country, but also an integrated part of the Balkans region, interconnected with all neighboring countries and beyond that. Moreover, the Balkans are one of the neighborhoods in a very heart, let's say, of this big city we call Europe. So if something is about to go wrong in our country or one of our countries, it is going to go wrong in other countries as well. Unfortunately, we are living today in a world going through a negative spiral of the outbreak and a reactivization of new and old conflicts. The rise of radicalism and terrorism combined with unprecedented violence, which affected our common security, our common stability, and our common peace. So the Balkans region is, without any doubt, the most vulnerable part of the European structure, one of the most vulnerable part of it. This area is still not organically included into the European security architecture, and since the geostrategic policy, no empty spaces is left out. So it remains a factor of strategic ambiguity, as well as a territory where third actors see vulnerabilities and opportunities for penetration, as they in fact already did. It's a long time now we are insisting in the fact that the threats, such as the waves of extremism or terrorism, as other global trends by endangering seriously our region, are jeopardizing the entire European security, the prosperity and the common values upon which EU is founded. So we are continuously stressing the great concern regarding the ongoing effects of the Russian Federation to destabilize the countries of the Western Balkans by interfering in their internal affairs and by opposing democratic processes that we Euro-Atlantic orientations do have. So in the light of current developments, we stress the importance of strengthening cooperation and unifying our positions in order to consolidate democracy and speed our European Atlantic integration process as a necessity for maintaining security and stability in our country and in the Western Balkans as well. The status quo leads to self-destruction, has said President Macron. So from this perspective, we have to move as fast as possible toward the Euro-Atlantic integration as the guarantee for security, peace, and prosperity in our region. The EU is the most successful peace project in the world history, having put an end to the spiral of endless bloody conflicts between its member states who have been involved in 2 world wars and divided by a Cold War as well. So along this process, each time new countries have joined the European Union, the sphere of peace and stability has also been extended, while the economic prosperity and social standards have drastically increased. So the driving and transforming power of the EU and the European integration process we talk about so far is also called the soft power. However, the soft power without the strong weapons, it's not enough to guarantee the peace and the security of Europe, including those of our countries in the region. So therefore, the EU SFSP sees the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, so the NATO one, as the hard power responsible for the territorial defense of Europe and reconciliation. Obviously, NATO, founded on the principle of collective defense, according to Article 5 of the treaty, plays the main role for the security of its member states. As such, for Albania as well as for all the Western Balkan countries, being or inspiring to be NATO members, the alliance is a guarantee against the current and the potential threats, putting at the risk and security all the values we commonly share. Unfortunately, the NATO's regional map of the Balkans is incomplete, lacking Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo. Therefore, we strongly believe that only a political and ideological cohesion of the NATO member countries, mainly of those being EU members too, and their serious commitment in favor of the full Euro-Atlantic integration of Balkan countries, remaining outside, could guarantee the economic progress, the democratic achievements, the common culture and values of our region in order to reinvigorate the security and prosperity of Europe as a whole and of Euro-Atlantic Alliance itself. Dear friends, I would end by quoting Machiavelli. I'm not interested in preserving the status quo. I want to overthrow it. So now it's time and crucial that the Western Balkan moves on, moves faster, moves closer to EU by meeting the European standards, but also through projects that connect our countries among themselves and with the EU, not only economically, but also institutionally and structurally becoming part of the same network, not only as consumers, but also as providers of values and contributions. So the geographical position of the region, whose strategic interests as a major linking bridge between the East and the West, should be reinforced by a new dynamic that would make its integration quicker, essential for Europe itself, while the prospect of the Balkans would also facilitate the EU efforts to face its challenges. Finally, we have to give hope, offer a valuable education and new perspectives to our youth, boost dialogue, promote understanding, truth and reconciliation among young people, so that they can contribute to the promotion of democratic values, tolerance, human rights, so they can build a better and brighter future for themselves and the generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your introductory remarks, and please stay with us for the Q&A. Now we have on the program Mr. Borko Stefanovic, the chairperson of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the National Assembly of the Republic of Serbia, and we had confirmation until last night that Mr. Stefanovic will be with us online today. Unfortunately, last night we received a message at 10 p.m. that he will not be taking part in this conference, and the reason is we have noted, I quote the message, that we have noted that a temporary institutions from Pristina have not marked appropriate and according to the agreement on notation of Kosovo and Metohija at international fora with asterisks and footnote. So we will not have the speaker today. And now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Arbereshe Kriesiu-Hisseni, Deputy Chairperson of the Committee for European Integration, Assembly of Kosovo. Hello, nice to see you with us, and the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Dear Mrs. Mulaima Andrikiene, dear fellow participants of this conference, please allow me to thank you for this opportunity and tell you that I am happy to be with you today to discuss an issue that is already a topic of discussion in the European politics everywhere, and that is the Western Balkans. I am Arbereshe Kriesiu-Hisseni, member of the Assembly of Kosovo from the ranks of Self-Determination Movement, and the Vice Chairperson of the Committee for European Integration. In fact, I am speaking to you from Brussels because for the last 3 days I was staying in Strasbourg, in which case I had the opportunity to hear the statement of the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who said that without the Western Balkans, the European Union, it will not be complete. So I am addressing you from Brussels, the European capital, where the main policies are being developed and the most important decisions are being made regarding the future of the Europe and the future of the countries that are now waiting to join the great European family. But now, for the first time since the Second World War, Europe is facing a situation that has caused considerable geopolitical tension. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has shaken the Europe as a whole. The European Union that was created after a war, calling for peace, for sure cannot tolerate a war now. The Russian invasion, with tragic consequences in addition to being an attack on the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine and the people of Ukraine, is also an attack on democracy and freedom. It is an attack on universal values. It is an attack on peace. It is an attack on common international security. It is an attack that has not only put Ukraine at risk, but is a serious threat to European security and stability, and not only that. One day after the war in Ukraine, began on 25th of February, the government of Kosovo, in line with its partner, the US and the EU, adopted a package of sanctions in response to Russia's military aggression. We believe that the immediate reaction of our government to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia has been seen as a clear message of our political and diplomatic orientation. Whereas our northern neighbor had acted differently, the connections of the Serbian president with Putin and their stance towards Russia also clearly shows their democratic and diplomatic orientation. To stand by the aggressor at a time when the world calls for peace and democracy clearly shows the ambitions and intentions of the state in question. Despite this, Kosovo continues to work with the greatest commitment in order to make its path towards the EU safe and near. As the most democratic country in the Western Balkans, during the period of Albin Kurti's government, we have managed to make significant progress in several areas of great importance. The reforms implemented in justice and the determination to fight organized crime and corruption have made us rank 17 places higher today, according to Transparency International. Kosovo has also made progress in terms of media freedom, where, according to Reporters Without Borders, we are also for 17 places higher. According to the data of the central bank, we have marked economic growth despite the situation with the pandemic and inflation. For the second time, an emergency package has been designed to mitigate the crisis during the pandemic and inflation. Bilateral relations are being built at European and international level, and around the world, our leaders are being taken as an example for, apart from being considered very capable, also have a clean past without corruption scandals. What is actually the message of Kosovo? We have shown that it is enough having the will and knowledge, and things can move forward. And thanks to the will to work for the future of our people, never before have we stood better than today in European and international appearance. Therefore, we have never been more ready to become part of the EU than we are today. In 2018, the European Commission gave the green light for Kosovo. The criteria for visa liberalization have been met, and despite the fact that we still remain isolated, work and progress have never been stopped. Visa liberalization is a process that has already gone beyond all technical and political issues, and there should be no more obstacles. Therefore, please allow me from here to tell the EU countries that the people of Kosovo, girls and boys, love freedom, and as all the people of Europe. The freedom to move around the continent to which they belong, the freedom to visit those countries whose model is mentioned every day in Kosovo as an example of progress. We learn in schools and universities about your university achievements, but our students and researchers do not have the opportunity to attend not even a university conference in your countries. You all understand how it feels. Our European perspective has an address. It is the European Union. Our engagement has a purpose. It is the European Union. Kosovo belongs to the big family of the European Union because we feel that way, and we strongly believe that even officially, we will soon be the Albanians who remain united with Europe for peace and security and for protection of democracy and freedom. Our belief in European values is unwavering. This is how our society is built, our collective consciousness. This is also our political and state orientation. Therefore, we see the future only together with the EU member states, because united, Europe is our destiny and our destination, now and always. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your contribution, and please stay with us. Now we will start our Q&A part of this session, and I hope that Madam Mimi Kodeli, she is also still with us. ready to take, great, ready to take questions. I have two names on my list. First is Emanuelis Zingeris and also Lina Strupinskienė. If anybody else who are with us online, please give me a sign if you would like to intervene. Emanuelis Zingeris, please.
Thank you so much. It's so good to see old friends here. Please believe that we are respecting your leading role and like a political figure and your friendship, and of course the other colleagues are great friends of the title under which we can be united, the Western democratic civilization. So you mentioned that the feeling, the common line, the roof of our belongingness, the obligation of belongingness to the Western democratic world is number one, and you described this feeling of obligation rising and in the Balkans, the moral, ethical, and political obligations to be among themselves friends, like it was done, of course, between Germany and France after Second World War, but continue to building our exclusive solidarity. So not America first, not Lithuania first, but solidarity, not Croatia first, but solidarity first and democracy first. So, but tell me, you told me specifically, you told to everyone here about specific role of Erdogan during his last visit. So probably he was exploiting some religious sentiments among few countries in the Balkans. What is your evaluation of our friends, of speculation, of and attacks of Iran, who is common enemy of United States, Israel, and other countries, and a little bit less Turkey, in the field of exploiting religious heritage to divide Balkans in the field of our common hope of integration of the Balkans to European Union and of course NATO. So that is the very short question, and it will be useful to have some comments on that, about this emotional stand, exploiting emotions, anti-Western emotions, using religious channels and building so-called their world. I'm sorry for my ironic tune. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emanuelis. Yes, Mr. Stier, please.
Yeah, thank you, Laima. Thank you, Emanuelis, for that question. Well, first of all, you rightly said we cannot entirely compare Turkey, well, certainly not with Iran. Turkey is a member of NATO, and in the past, in the 90s in particular, Turkey played a very constructive role. We worked very closely, and we continue to believe that engagement and cooperation with Turkey is still essential for the Balkans, and that's why, for example, President Erdogan was also in Croatia. We do believe that. Now, it's also the case that unfortunately there were some messages, and it's not just one isolated issue, but it has been now for several years. This idea that somehow the exploitation, as you said, of certain religious sentiments, and the idea that the West is in contradiction or with Islam, or that Muslims, for example, or people of Muslim religion in the Balkans somehow should be anti-Western orientated, which is certainly something that was not, and it's not, I believe, in the interest of any of the countries in the Balkans, including, of course, of the communities Muslim communities in different countries in the Western Balkans. So that was a disturbing message in that sense. Now, when I say that with Turkey we need an engagement, I do believe that they need to be at the table, that we need to work with them. For example, in October, if I understand correctly, when we had this idea of the European political community that was launched by President Macron, but it was supported now by the Commission. Ursula von der Leyen mentioned that at the State of the European Union. Turkey is also invited, and rightly so. But we need also to be clear then for the countries in the Western Balkans, if they want to join the European Union, they have to be very clear that they're part then of the Western democracies, to adopt all the rules and values that are valid in the Western democracies. And that has to be very clear. When it comes to this particular situation, for example, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there was unfortunately here an attack from President Erdogan to the High Representative, Mr. Schmidt. And that was actually the trigger to some of these comments. And that was because the High Representative wanted to introduce certain changes in the electoral law. There were a lot of criticism from the embassy of the Russian Federation to that, because they do not accept Christian Schmidt or the legitimacy of his appointment. And interesting, you mentioned that there was also a statement issued by the embassy of Iran against these attempts of changing it. And that is showing how complicated sometimes things can get when there is not clarity of the purpose, what we really want to do. What we really want to see is, for example, for Bosnia and Herzegovina, a very clear European and Euro-Atlantic path. And that is not to be part of a sphere of influence of Turkey or Russia, but we believe that the future lies in the Euro-Atlantic structures, both as member of the EU and NATO. This is what the citizens actually, you know that Bosnia and Herzegovina has 3 different constituent peoples, but I believe that there is a commonality that they see the future looking to the West and being part of these Western structures. And that's why it's disrupting when you see messages that are actually derailing that process. That's, I guess, tried to respond to your question. Of course, we could elaborate further, but again, I think that the basics is this. We don't want, not for Bosnia and Herzegovina or the Western Balkans as such, any other future than a perspective as a region and countries that are fully integrated in the European and Euro-Atlantic structures.
Thank you very much. And I see that Ms. Kodeli, she would like to react to this question as well. Please.
Thank you, my dear friend. I will keep it really brief. Well, 2 points. Turkey, I have to stress that is a strategic ally of us. So by saying that, I think that I just want to underline to all of you, dear friends, that Albania is the most vivid, marvelous example of the way we with different religion backgrounds can co-live. We never had a religion war within us in our ancient history. So, not by chance, Pope Francisco began his European trip after he became the Holy Father with a visit to Tirana, just to give that message to all countries, but especially to Europe. And when it comes to the Islamic regime of Iran, I'd like to mention that this regime is not a threat only for for USA and Israel, but it's a threat of all Western democracies and beyond. So if there is a threat from of a country, a NATO country like Albania, or a European country, it's a threat for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we have 3 more questions. The next one, next speaker is Lina Strupinskaya from the University of Vilnius. Please.
Good morning, everyone. I have a short question to Madam Haiseni. One of the key problems for Euro-Atlantic integration in Kosovo is, of course, the negotiations with Serbia. And it is a very hard battle, an uphill battle, where you have to deal with a neighbor that's stronger and more powerful than you are. And one of the examples is just simply the absence of the Serbian speaker today. And what are your hopes and towards the development of these negotiations in the nearest future? I know that a lot of things are happening just behind closed doors and you cannot comment much on it, but maybe you could share some insights about what you expect to happen in the nearest months.
Thank you very much. The question was addressed to our speaker from Pristina, I understand. Are you with us? Ms. Haiseni.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. And of course, I'm going to answer. You said that Serbia is stronger and more powerful than we are. And of course, that I don't think so, because when we are talking about a country that is supporting Russia right now, I think that we can't say that they are stronger and more powerful than we are, because during those days I had the chance to meet many of the MEPs and as well as other EU institutions officers. And I think that they don't see Serbia as you supposed to see, because for as long as they stay along Russia and they support the aggression in there, I think they are losing their power, if we can say so. And yes, we are having, we are facing with the difficulties in this dialogue process with Serbia. But still, I think that there is no dialogue, because if there is a dialogue, it should be 2 countries that do dialogue with each other. And we see that anytime we go in Brussels and try to start the dialogue, there is Serbia that leaves the room, and there is their president that leaves the room, and there is no dialogue. So there can be no dialogue since there is no recognition, for sure. And I think there will be no dialogue, because with whom it's supposed to dialogue? Our prime minister, since the president of the Serbia leaves the room all the time, or he wants to dialogue only for the topics or issues that he thinks that are important. But I think that since there are common interests for countries, and I think that there are, it should be like that kind of dialogue when you sit and talk about the issues that are in interest of the countries. And this is how they should do. And I think from our part, our prime minister is doing its best to talk in the dialogue about the things that are important for the citizens of Kosovo and for the citizens of Serbs that lives in Kosovo. And I guess President of Serbia is not doing the same, because probably he wants to talk for what he thinks that it is important for him, and not for the people that cross the borders and they want to have like an easier life and less problems that they had till now.
Thank you very much for your reply. Valdas Rakutis, Professor Valdas Rakutis, member of the Lithuanian Parliament. Please, the floor is yours. Prašau, kolega.
Hello for everybody. It's very nice to see you in meeting place and also our friends from West Balkans. Unfortunately, I can't be with you. I will make some reactions and maybe some ideas for the future. War against Ukraine is big tragedy and disaster, of course, for people who live in Ukraine, but at the same time, it accelerates processes in Europe which was impossible before. And I hope that integration processes will be quicker and more effective than before. So it's sometimes some chance, I think, for West Balkans. And because people are more active and have less illusions as were before. But the process of cooperation in Balkans depends much more on the situation in Ukraine. Because if some states like Serbia have some hopes about future cooperation with Kremlin, with Moscow, they have to lose them. Because last events in Izum and other places, Bucha, shows that with such a regime have no credibility for future, and really Serbia have to find new ways. My question is, you feel some changes in society of Serbians which live in your countries, some communities, about losing big respect for Russians like it was before, or you are still on the same direction and it's not good direction, of course. So have you observed some progress in this field? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I understand that you would like to have replies from all our speakers. So, Mr. Stier, you're first, please.
Well, let me say like this. Unfortunately, now the government in Belgrade has not yet taken a decision, and I'm not sure whether they will take it in terms of joining the regime of sanctions. They say they would like to continue with the European path. At the same time, they still avoid to take a very clear position on the Russian aggression by joining the sanctions. So it's not that is the situation. They also imitate, and that is a key problem, as I mentioned in the introductory remarks, they imitate this concept, this geopolitical concept of the Russian world. They call it the Serbian world. Just to give you an example, yesterday it was the so-called day of the Serbian flag and Serbian unity. And then you had the president of Serbia, the member of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Mr. Dodik, and the patriarch of the Serbian Orthodox Church in Bosnia talking about, well, borders are not necessarily always like this, in the future could change, so basically flirting with the change of borders and to see Republika Srpska one day probably with Serbia, which is of course a very dangerous idea, even if you are flirting or coming to very close to that. This is destabilizing, and this is a disrupting, of course, element and concept for the Europeanization, for the European and Euro-Atlantic future and perspective of the entire Balkans. In terms of progress in the dialogue, we will see how it goes. As small steps, sometimes we can also help with taking some certain decisions. For example, on Monday, at the Bureau of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, decided to include the parliamentary delegation of Kosovo to participate in the work of the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly. They do not have yet the right to vote. They have applied already for full membership, and we hope that will proceed. But already now in October, they will be able to participate in the debates, to take the floor. So I think that is facilitating the dialogue. You will have representatives of the Parliament of Kosovo. You will have also, of course, representatives of the Parliament of Serbia in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And that is one of the ways how, for example, regional institutions can also facilitate the dialogue. I think dialogue has a value in itself, and this is a concrete contribution. So on that more optimistic note, I will try to answer, but unfortunately on certain other issues that are still key, we cannot see yet a positive resolution. And as I said, it's all about the political will to have a very clear strategic alignment with the West.
Thank you, Davor. Ms. Kodeli, would you like to reply to this question as well?
Well, I think that the Western Balkans is quite an interesting place of the world. It's everything but not a boring one. So, and it's gonna not be a boring one, most probably. On the other side, I think that nationalism is not going to serve and help no one. We can be patriots in the right way, and it's good to be patriots, but to be nationalists, I think that nationalism is not the key of solving questions. On the contrary, I'm very pleased and I'm very hopeful that, and I will jump to another dimension of my discussion, that the most longevous and successful NATO mission is still functioning in the Western Balkans area, the KFOR-1. And this mission is of big importance and is a kind of pillar for the security of all of us. I'm lucky to lead the NATO Assembly delegation to supervise the Bosnia-Herzegovina elections at the end of this month, at the beginning of October. So I will try to see myself, these important process of democracy, such as elections. And by coming from a country where our background, as I mentioned before, it's a different background, a religion one at least, but which helps us in reinforcing our identity as Albanian ones, rather than destroying our existence. So you can use the differences to become the strongest point of view of yours, rather than the weakened point. And so it's something that I would like to share with my Bosnian-Herzegovina colleagues, because I'm telling you something very funny. How can, when we say we respect religions, which is the way we do that, we just marry each other, as simple as that, without changing the religion of each other. And this is the best thing we can share of the Albanian values, we can share with the others. So no differences can make us weaker. The differences are the added values of the Western values we would like to join, all of us, as are the best values we know. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Haiseni, would you like to reply to the question raised? Yeah, excuse me, I just to warn you, would like to warn you that you have 2 minutes and not more, because we still have more questions. And yes.
No, I will be short. I just want to say that probably I don't think that I have the competence to speak about what it is Serbian citizens that living in Kosovo opinion about Russian after the war began. But I maybe can share a personal example. It's like for sure there are Serbs that lives in the same neighborhood with us, and I guess they have several times mentioned that they don't support the aggression in Russia, because I think it is just because they don't have any problems living in Kosovo. Like they live in peace and in a good understanding with us. They are fully integrated and engaged in our institutions. So I think there is no reason to support such an aggression. Still, they live in a community that we offered from them. So I think probably there will be someone else that should give you the questions, but from my point of view, and from as much as I could say, because I often meet them and have the chance to talk with them, I see that they are like strongly against it.
Thank you. And I have one more name on the list. Spanish ambassador to Lithuania, Ms. Nieves Blanco. Please, Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting us to this dialogue. It's very relevant, and Spain is an active part of it, so I'm very happy to be here today. I have a reflection and a question. Ms. Codelli underlined the European Union is a big peace project. The threat against this project comes from outside, but especially from the lack of unity inside Europe. Our societies need to understand the value of this peace project. So I really appreciate the message of Mr. Stier to start the enlargement by societies. The European unity involves counting on the Balkan countries, and we are very aware of that. My question is how to convey the message that enlargement and unity is not against others, is just a tool to reinforce peace and stability. So this is a philosophical question, I know, but we need to find answers for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stier, Davor, please.
Gracias, señora embajadora. Paso al inglés para que nos puedan entender todos. Well, thank you very much for your question. I do believe that there was in the enlargement process, and we are the last member of the European Union that has completed that accession process. And we sensed already that there was a debate within Europe how much to enlarge and how much to integrate. And between these two principles, there were some countries that were saying, well, if we enlarge too much, we are complicating the decision-making process. And sometimes even the enlargement process could be used in order to be, as you mentioned, against rather than to integrate. It's true that the enlargement implies certain issues when it comes to the decision-making process and to the concept of having a more political union where we can have more or a more important, more let's say articulated also foreign policy, and then we are discussing even on which areas probably we should continue to take decisions by consensus, on which others probably we should be thinking about a qualified majority. As you know, this is an open debate in the EU. But at the end of the day, I would say that always it comes to the question of if a country is joining the EU, we have to use this process to see that this country really shares the key values, the core values of the European Union, and also if you want, the strategic interests of the European Union. Now, this is, again, a very interesting debate because sometimes we do not have always the same view within the EU. But there are, I think, after the Russian aggression, in this sense, more clarity than before. We certainly know that autocracies and autocratic regimes are certainly something we need to confront in order to preserve the European Union as a space of freedom, of democracy, as a peace project. So we have to make sure that within the EU we still adhere to these values. And there are mechanisms to monitor that and even to correct things when things are going wrong. But also we need to make sure that in the enlargement process, when we are accepting, when we are integrating a country, it's a country that will share that and will be an added value and not a blocking element in the decision-making process in the EU. So that is the way I would approach this issue. And that's why it's so important. I say this with the experience of Croatia. For the current candidates, it's very important, especially at this moment, to show that strategic alliance with the West.
Thank you very much. We have to conclude our first session. I see that our speakers, participants of the second session are already with us. I see you online. Hello, welcome. And just to conclude the first session, I would like, first of all, to cordially thank all of you. Mr. Davor Stier, Ms. Mimi Kodeli, Ms. Arbereshia Krieziu Haiseni, our participants from Croatia, Albania and Kosovo, and all participants of the conference who contributed with their questions and comments. At the end of the conference, if we have some time, I would ask you, our speakers, to possibly provide your concluding remarks. And now, thank you for participating in this part of the conference. And now we move to our session 2. On European integration of Western Balkan countries from the perspective of the European Parliament, the European Commission, and the European External Action Service. Mr. Maciej Popovski, who was originally and who still is on our program, yesterday we received his message of apologies that he won't be able to be with us today, and I know that Mr. Thomas Hack-Leitner, head of the Western Balkans Policy and Regional Strategy Unit from the Directorate General for Neighborhood and Enlargement Negotiations, DG NEAR, from the European Commission, will be speaking. Yes, I see you. Hello. So the floor is yours. Please.
Hello, thank you very much. First of all, I have to make a double excuse. I want to excuse Maciej Popovski, who couldn't attend because he's traveling with our president. So sorry for that. And the second excuse is my voice. Unfortunately, I lost my voice this morning. So if it's not a bad connection, I'm afraid it really is my voice. So sorry for that. Well, enlargement is back on the EU's agenda, and back at the level it's always been on our agenda here in DG NEAR, but what I mean, it's back at the level of the European Council of our leaders, and that has, of course, to do with the Russian war on Ukraine. But what we've seen in terms of enlargement over the last months is the fact that we have 3 new enlargement countries: Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, 2 of which are candidate candidate countries, and we also have 2 negotiating countries, and that's North Macedonia and Albania. I think the fact that immediately after the Russian war of aggression, the membership applications have come in, it shows the importance of the message behind enlargement and the role of the EU in ensuring peace and stability on the continent. I know that speaking about peace these days is a very is a difficult issue. Now coming back to the Western Balkans, and I mentioned the opening of accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania, and I think this is a step that really cannot be underestimated. It's a step that has been long overdue. It's a step that has been merited by the 2 countries. We know that not all the compromises that led to this step were perfect, but still on balance, we think this is a very, very, very positive news. The negotiating frameworks have been adopted, and we have already started the screening exercise. So yesterday, for example, the first meetings of screening, and some of you might remember, have taken place with both countries. So really, we are not wasting any time on trying to move forward with both countries. So now we have 4 negotiating countries in the Western Balkans, and I think that's really will change the dynamic over time. Now, the fact that it's back up on the political agenda of the leaders can in a way be illustrated by the number of high-level meetings as well with the Western Balkans. We have the summit in June with the Western Balkans. We have an upcoming European Political Community Summit now on the 6th of October. We will have the Western Balkans summit under the Berlin process in early November, and we will have another summit with the Western Balkans in December under the Czech Council presidency. Just to them again as an illustration how that enlargement is back high up on the agenda. From our side, as a Commission, we're preparing currently our annual enlargement package, which will come out in October, with our country reports on the 7 countries, Western Balkans and Turkey. Last time we'll have 7, as of next year we'll also cover the new 3 enlargement countries, Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia. And of course, we'll focus, as usual, on the fundamentals of the process, on good governance, the consolidation of rule of law and democracy. They will continue to determine the pace of overall of the relations and overall. Excuse me, there's now, I wouldn't like to go too much now into the geographic side of the country by country. And what I would like to stress is the fact that we are working very closely as well with the Western Balkans to help them facing the crisis that we are all facing in terms of higher energy prices, inflation, etc., which are due as well, in particular to the Russian war. The main instrument we have to this effect for the Western Balkans is the economic and investment plan, where with around €9 billion under the instrument of reaccession, we aim to leverage around 20 billion of investment. And now, 2 years after the adoption of this plan by the European Commission, we are now in a phase of implementing this, and we are trying to accelerate and focus as much as we can on those challenges that I mentioned before, on energy projects, on diversification of energy sources, moving away from fossil fuels and reducing dependence on Russia. This is very much what we are trying to focus on and are working with the countries of the region. I would also like to stress that we are working a lot with them to help them on regional economic cooperation and building up an inclusive common regional market. And now there is a lot of work going on in this area to try and help the freer movement and facilitate the movement of persons, goods, services, and capital around the region. And again, I think this could play an important role in mitigating the impacts of the crisis, and a lot of technical work is there has been finished, but has not yet been agreed at a political level. And also probably then Jaroslav Lajčák might say a few words on this afterwards, because he's very much engaged and helping also as part of his role to overcome the obstacles to inclusive regional economic cooperation. And the upcoming summit in Berlin, under the Berlin process, provides an opportunity to unlock some of this work, which would not only send a strong political signal that the region is able to cooperate and also stand together faced with the adverse impacts of the Russian war, but it will also have significant economic benefits for the entire region. I would stop here, and I'm also happy to look forward to the discussion. And again, excuse the bad quality of my voice this morning. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hagleitner, for your contribution to the conference. And please stay with us for the Q&A. Our next speaker is Mr. Miroslav Lajčák, EU Special Representative for the Belgrade-Pristina Dialogue and other Western Balkan regional issues. That is the official title of Mr. Lajčák. But knowing your experience and really very busy agenda you have, we sincerely appreciate your participation. Thank you very much for being with us, and the floor is yours. Please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'm sending my best regards from rainy Brussels to Vilnius. Thank you very much for hosting this conference, because it's yet another testimony to the importance of the European future for the Western Balkans. And this European future was made a commitment already 19 years ago in 2003 in Thessaloniki. But since then, only one country of the Western Balkans, namely Croatia, has become a full member, and the four are in the process. And before June, it was only two, and four were waiting. Now 4 are in the process, 2 are waiting, but this is clearly not the speed that was envisaged by our predecessors back in 2003. So the fact is that European Union believed for a number of years that the region is in a safe place, and the region can wait, and we can focus on our internal agenda first before dealing with the Western Balkans. But fortunately, this is no longer true. There is a new commitment on the side of the European Union. This new commitment, which we can observe for at least 2-3 years. And this new commitment was even more reinforced by Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, because this war showed that nothing can be taken for granted, even in Europe, and not even peace. And also showed that we need peace, stability, and reconciliation more than ever. And it also showed that the countries of the Western Balkans cannot wait. And we really need to finish our unfinished business and to make them full members. So we have a new momentum. The war, Russia's war against Ukraine, as tragic as it is, has helped us to create a positive momentum for enlargement for the Western Balkans. The fact that the European Union made a strategic decision of granting candidate status to Ukraine, Moldova, and conditionally to Georgia also shows the EU's commitment, resolve, but also strategic leadership. That's very important. Now we expect this to be followed also in more resolute steps in the Western Balkans, because this is a two-way street. So on one hand, there is a lot of goodwill on our side. On the other hand, we also want to see a renewed commitment from the side of Western Balkans. Lithuania joined the European Union at the same time as my country, Slovakia, 2004. And we remember how important for us during these years leading to our full membership was to have a real and credible European perspective. Because this, knowing that the perspective is there and it's real, it helps us to stay united, to overcome challenges, to focus on the future rather than on past, and to undertake and accept challenging reforms and transformation process. I am not sure how these processes would look like if we were not sure about the membership at the end of the process. So we were, and in a way still are, in the situation where the countries of the Western Balkans are not entirely sure that we want to see them as full members in the near future. So this needs to change, because full integration of the Western Balkans into European Union is not only morally right. That means it's not only means that we've fulfilled our promise, but it also makes sense. First of all, they are our in-yard. They are surrounded by the European Union countries, so this is not a distant region. They will complete the European area of peace, stability, and prosperity. Second, it is in our interest that our immediate neighbors share our norms and our values, and are building societies which are based on the values of multi-ethnicity, freedom of media, independent judiciary, who respect and honor free and democratic elections, and who support vibrant democratic society. So these are the European values, and of course it's better for us to export these values into the Balkans rather than import instability from the Balkans to the European Union. And also, we live in an interconnected world. We are facing challenges which cannot be addressed by individual countries, whether we speak about climate change, migration, digitalization, COVID, or now energy, for example, and many others. We need to have a joint approach. And as I said, no individual country can do it alone, and we need the Balkans to be part of our effort. So that's why there should be no hesitation or lack of clarity on the side of the European Union. At the same time, I have to say that the process of the completion of the European integration process will not happen by default, by inertia, or because of geopolitics. So our partners in the Western Balkans must do their part of the work, and they must convince the member states that with their membership, European Union will be stronger and will be functioning not less than it performs now. So the functionality of the European Union is very important. They also need to somehow deal with the issues of the past because they prevent them from addressing the future. And we still see nationalistic tendencies, ethnic divisions in the region. We see anti-democratic movements. We also see strong anti-EU and anti-West trends in parts of the Western Balkans region. So that means we need to be in this exercise together and help each other. I don't want to speak about the individual countries, but of course I want to mention some challenges which we need to address, and the problematic impeded functionality of Bosnia and Herzegovina is probably the most serious challenge we have. Unresolved status of relations between Kosovo and Serbia is what I see as the most strategic challenge, because this is something that has an impact on every country in the region, and you know that I'm quite invested in this one, and we are trying to bring this process of normalization to a successful end. I'm worried about Montenegro, having been a front runner among the six, has not progressed on the European reforms practically at all in the last 2 years. So they might lose their privileged position as being the front runner unless they put their acts together. And of course, North Macedonia, we are all happy that the country joined the accession process together with Albania, but they still need to overcome the last hurdle, which is to adopt constitutional changes, and they will need our help for this. And then I really believe that the country will be on a safe track. So therefore, the understanding that we are in it together, that it's not a service we are doing to the country of the Western Balkans, but actually a service we are doing to ourselves, is extremely important. Plus, and this is my concluding remark, after the war in Ukraine, we will not go to the world as it was before. There will be a new world order, clearly, and we don't know what this new order will look like, but we definitely want to make sure that the European Union will be one of the actors shaping this new order. And for this to happen, we must not keep ourselves busy with the Western Balkans for another 5 years. We must be united so that we are stronger and we can be a truly geopolitical player. And that's why we need to finish this unfinished business with the European integration of the Western Balkans. I'll stop here and I'm looking forward to our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution, for your remarks. And I already have a list of participants who would like to ask you questions, but that will be after our next speaker. Mr. Paolo Rangel, rapporteur on Bosnia and Herzegovina from the European Parliament, my dear former colleague from my years in the European Parliament. Mr. Rangel, the floor is yours, please.
So first, I'd like to thank you very much your invitation, to say that it's a pleasure to watch and to see from Porto in the far west of Europe this room, where I was, by the way, on the 23rd of February, so really near to the invasion and aggression of Russia towards Ukraine. And let me tell you, to all the members of Lithuanian Sejm, and especially for this committee, that all across Europe, we admire very, very much the efforts of Lithuanian people and of your government, of your members of the European Parliament, that are working in an outstanding way to defend Ukraine, to support Ukraine, and to defend, that is at the very end, the European way of life. And so this is really something that I would like to state, to do as a statement before I start here my very, very humble remarks on this issue. Naturally, I salute all my friends of this panel. Also, it was a pleasure to see here David Stier, a very good friend from Croatia. And now let me do some remarks. First, we have to acknowledge that something is wrong with this process of accession of the Western Balkans. So it's not normal that these countries had to wait 19, 20 years, even if it was 10 or 12 years to join the European Union. It's too long time, and the problem is not only that they didn't have joined the European Union, is that the progress inside some of them is really also not encouraging. And so as a collective, European Union member states and these 6 states of Western Balkans, we are not delivering. And I think this is a two-way responsibility. Surely this is a responsibility of the 6 member states, 2 that are already in negotiation, 2 that are formally candidates, and 2 that would aspire to become candidates. But it is true that they have their own responsibility, and I know this very well, especially because I have this huge privilege that at the same time is a huge responsibility of being the permanent rapporteur to Bosnia-Herzegovina. But the truth is that also European Union is not, in my opinion, so committed as it should. It was not in the past, and I dare to say to Miroslav Lasiak, I don't think that in the last 2-3 years we were so committed. If you speak about your role, I'd say you are totally committed. But I speak about the Commission, I speak about the Council. Probably the Parliament is a bit more, I'd say, committed, but its role in constitutional and community law terms is not so important at this stage. And so it's really Commission and Council that should deliver more. This being said, let me say, or let me stress 2 dimensions of this complex file, this complex challenge for European Union. The first one is really the geopolitical one. And it was not the Ukrainian war, this aggression of Russia, that changed this, I'd say, context. I'd say that it showed that this is an urgent matter, but before that, it is obvious, if you look at the map of Europe, if you look at our history, at our traditions, that the natural vocation, the natural destiny of the states of this region is to become full members of the European Union. And this is something that naturally now is much more obvious than it was before, but this was the natural path. And when I say that, I'm saying because we have to see that there is no Europe as such without the Western Balkans. Even in their diversity, they really are a symbol, I'd say, of our union. Something that I always, in a very pedagogical, sometimes not effective way, try to tell to my fellow colleagues and authorities in Bosnia-Herzegovina is that Bosnia-Herzegovina is a kind of a summary of European Union. To organize their own state, they could be inspired by European Union, that is a model of diversity where different member states, different religions, different ethnicities, they cooperate in a very effective and coordinated manner. And so that they are naturally, I'd say, European, because they really have this tradition. And then you can look at a lot of member states where the diversity is there, and they naturally with some tensions that are, I'd say, political and sometimes even cultural, but that they solve because democracy is about solving these differences and about creating compromise. And so this is one thing, is to say that this is really very important for us, not only for the Western Balkans. Another issue now is really that things became, and that is the second dimension, urgent. Why? If I could say so in a very simple way, because the time is not so much, I would say that after Ukrainian territory, there are 2 regions where the risk of a conflict, and I'm speaking also about a war, or at least armed conflict, is very high. One is here very close to us today, that is the border between Lithuania and Poland, and in this strip that goes to Kaliningrad exclave, and this is naturally a very, very tense region, we know, because of this idea of continuity between Belarus and Kaliningrad. And so these 80 kilometers are really a very sensitive region of Europe today. And the other, I'm afraid to say, but I have to say, is Bosnia-Herzegovina. And we have a huge responsibility to prevent, to avoid, and to exclude a war scenario, or even some armed conflict that is not formally a war, but that would bring a lot of violence, because this is not excluded. And here, my Lithuanian friends, speaking especially to you, you are very aware of what is a Russian interference and Russian influence. And in the case of the Balkans as a whole, but especially in the case of Bosnia-Herzegovina, when you see the tensions between Republika Srpska, between Bosniaks and Croats, there is today a huge presence of Russian influence. It was already very strong before, but they are taking the opportunity. And so when they are trying to seize this moment, and when I say this, it's only to show that if we had made progress before, if both parties, the Western Balkan states and the European Union, were more engaged and more involved, then probably today we would be in a more stable and safer situation. And so I have to say, I was one of the great defenders, even in my country where my government was a bit reluctant, very pro-Ukraine, but very reluctant to concede the candidate status to Ukraine and to Moldova. And of course, the perspective to Georgia. But I have to say that this changed also the game in the Western Balkans. We have to speed up. We have to accelerate the pace. And that is only feasible if we go to the Western Balkans to help them and also to press them in a certain way. And this means that we have to give support to Miroslav Tusk and also to the Commission and efforts, of course. But we need that President von der Leyen, President Michel, some commissioners, even some heads of state or prime ministers, that they really take seriously this fight. I think that if we engage all our political weight, we have some chance of making progress. If we do this like as we were, I'd say, the audience of something that is a bit longer, and then we have some volunteers that are really aware of what is going on and are fighting every day to peace and to understanding, but then they are not backed in a very political way by the institutions that do a lot of declarations, and that I won't say that they are ill-intended, quite the contrary, but they are so consumed by the international agenda and by their own internal agenda that they tend to underestimate the huge urgency that we have now. And at the end, if we succeed and if we support all the stakeholders that want speed up this process, we will thank them very much. Because if we give them a perspective, if we see that things are moving, then I think that we would have for Europe, European Union, but also for these peoples that sometimes are victims of their own leaders, I should say. Some in past, it's only a kind of political game and not really an obstacle. It's only because the leaders don't want to progress more. If we do engage in this way, I think that we could have some good news, and that would be a relief and a hope to European Union by one hand and to the peoples of the region that should be our priority at these times.
Thank you very much, Mr. Angel. And now I would like to announce that we have one more speaker at this session, and it's my pleasure and honor to introduce to you Mr. Michał Kamiński, who is Deputy Speaker of the Polish Senate. So the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much for invitation, and thank you very much, Madam Andrikiene, for giving me an opportunity to speak to you today. And I would like to apologize for my delay. It's because of actually confusion with the time change between Warsaw, Kiev, and Vilnius. So I was totally confused, and that's why I'm late, and I'm really sorry about it. However, it's always good to have a good messages which are coming to us from Ukraine. But we are talking today about Western Balkan perspective. And I think that it is very important that we are raising this particular issue today, when the focus of the whole world, including European Union, for obvious reason, is concentrated on the eastern dimension of European integration of our eastern borders because of a conflict in Ukraine. But the importance of Western Balkans is, I think we are seeing the importance of Western Balkans especially strongly today, because we see that Europe needs regions of stability, needs regions in which, however previously we faced a lot of conflicts which are absolutely comparable to the conflicts which we are facing now today in Eastern Europe. But thanks to the actually European perspective, many of the Western Balkan nations are trying to find its way to stability, peace, and prosperity. And I think that the European perspective should be seen not only in, as we see it today in Ukraine, but also in Western Balkans. The European perspective should be seen as a choice, not a geopolitical choice, but a choice of a better way of life, choice of better way of resolving conflicts, and this European choice, which was so important for Poles and Lithuanians 20 years ago, when we started our process of changing our countries and changing our societies. And I can say from the Polish perspective that this European chance and the European perspective was crucial not only for developing Poland so strongly, but also for solving our historical problems with our neighbors. I think that thanks to the European perspective, our relations with our Lithuanian brothers and sisters are now better than ever. I think that our relations with Germany are now better than ever because of a European integration. And I think that this European perspective, for such a, sorry to say, a fragile region as Western Balkans, is very important, because Europe is giving us an example how to solve the problems between nations and how to build a common and better future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we move to our Q&A. I already have at least 4 names on the list, and the first one is Davor Stier, please.
Thank you, Laima, and it's always good to see good friends like Paolo and Miroslav. Well, just very briefly, a brief comment and a question to both Paolo and Miroslav. We are seeing in the eastern neighborhood, in the southern neighborhood of the European Union, and in the Western Balkans, which are 3, of course, different areas. The Western Balkans were promised a European perspective already in Thessaloniki. We are glad to see now also a European perspective for countries in the eastern neighborhood. In the southern neighborhood is a different situation. But in all of 3 areas, we see 3 geopolitical actors. We see the European Union representing in a way the West, yeah? With, of course, a strategic alliance and a security guarantee through NATO from the US, but it's the EU that is representing the West in this area. We see Russia and we see Turkey. We would like Turkey to see, as a country moving towards the European Union, but at the, in the last years we are seeing also a different and more an anti-Western attitude sometimes. And of course, I don't need to comment what is the position of the Russian Federation, especially after the 24th of February with a full-fledged aggression to Ukraine. Now, in this sense, when it comes to the Balkans, shouldn't we probably see a little bit more of political support to those who are representing, in a way, the West, for example, in Bosnia and Herzegovina? We have the High Representative that has been attacked by the embassy of the Russian Federation, of Iran, and just a few days ago in his comments, not so harshly, but still also criticized by Erdogan. Yeah. And he wanted to do something. I understand that he had the support, and it was clear the support of the US. Somehow the support of the EU was probably not so evident to the High Representative. Shouldn't we be a little bit more articulated here? That is one question. And another, it's if the moment, and Miroslav explained, of course, how it's important also for the countries, for the candidate countries and those who aspire to become candidates, to have a strategic alignment with the European Union. And I can only agree with that. But at the same time, probably we could also move a little bit faster in integrating societies. For example, the question of regional agreements in the Western Balkans to get rid of the roaming fees. It's a good example, but wouldn't it be better if they are not integrated already in the European single market on this issue, so that they are free from roaming, from roam fees also, when, for example, when calling not just from Belgrade to Tirana, but also, for example, if they are calling Vilnius, Bratislava, or Zagreb, or Lisbon? Whether that be probably a way to move forward, even if for the political movement of the enlargement process we still have to wait a little bit longer. So 2 concrete questions. Again, good to see you, both of you.
Thank you, dear Davor. If you allow me, I will collect more questions because the list is, becoming longer. I would like to introduce Radvilė Morkūnaitė Mikulėnienė, who is Deputy Speaker of the Lithuanian Parliament, and Radvilė, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear Laima, for organizing and bringing us together, and for everybody that supported this event today here. I'm sorry I couldn't be from the beginning. We've been discussing regional issues on European Affairs Committee as regards Rail Baltica project, but my question would be to Mr. Miroslav Lajčák as regards the Pristina-Belgrade dialogue, and we've all were witnessing with some uncertainty, so to say. The previous and recent events in Kosovo as regards these number plates issue, so I'm very happy that it has been solved with the help of the European Union. But what is your take on, how the whole situation will develop? We all know the attitude towards each other of those two countries, but what you would see the most dangerous aspects of collaboration between those countries, and what could ignite some other circumstances that we've been witnessing recently, and maybe we could already be prepared for that, and taking and keeping in mind that some other issues may come up, and to be more well prepared.
Thank you very much, Radvile, and I will take one more question, and then I will ask our speakers to reply. Aušrinė Venckavičienė from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Actually, I had a very similar question as Radvile Morkūnaitė has just asked, but now I would like to ask Special Representative Mr. Lajčák about the prospects of Serbia becoming EU member if the dialogue, Pristina and Belgrade dialogue, does not move forward. What are the perspectives of Serbia to become an EU member? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lajčák, please, you will be the first one to reply, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question and for your interest. So let me start with the questions about the dialogue. The dialogue is the only platform for Kosovo and Serbia to meet as equal partners and to discuss the current issues that the life brings on a daily basis. But of course, the ultimate goal is to normalize the relations. So my mandate is tasking me with facilitating comprehensive, legally binding agreement on normalization of the relations. They both know, Serbia and Kosovo, that they cannot join the European Union without normalizing their relations. And I don't need to explain why. I mean, it's impossible to imagine Serbia and Kosovo joining the EU with the current state of relations. So that's very clear. It's not the only condition, because they also have to meet all the conditions that are applied to them as well as to every other acceding country. But this one is on top of it, dictated by life, and we are telling them your path to the European Union goes through the dialogue. They understand it. Of course, the dialogue is also in the past, it already produced a number of very concrete agreements that improve the life of people when it comes to travel, to trade, to customs services, revenue collections, communications, the border or boundary management, access to judicial services. It dissolved the Serbian power structures in the north and made them part of Kosovo legal system. But there is still lots of work to do. So we are focusing on the future, on the big agreement on normalization. But it's hard to do when we are disturbed by crisis on the ground. And you mentioned the issue of the ID cards and entry-exit cards, which was a real crisis. And we saw that on the 31st of July, we were very close to escalation. People were ready to use weapons. And it would be repeated on the 31st of August. But fortunately, we found a solution, European solution, with less paper and more freedom for travel, only with ID cards. And I want to give credit to the United States, who have been very, very helpful also in this. But I still have two big issues on my plate which have the escalation potential. The one is the issue of the license plates. Kosovo wants to end the circulation of Serbia-issued license plate, the so-called KM plates, and they want to do it until the 31st of October. The campaign started 1st of September. Today is the 16th. There are approximately 9,000 of these license plates circulating in Kosovo. As of today, 2 Serbs changed their plates. We don't want to have another crisis because of the license plates on the 31st. And therefore, I'm communicating, of course, with both parties, but particularly with Kosovo, to find a solution that will avoid escalation. We don't need escalation because of license plates at times when we have war in Ukraine. I don't need to convince you. Then the second issue, which is very serious, which I see a real issue, is the issue of the energy. As you know, the Serbs in the north have not paid for their electricity for the last 20 years. And we managed to finalize an agreement on energy roadmap in June, which will bring law and order into the system. The Serbs will pay, and Kosovo government that has subsidized the north with 130 million euros so far, will finally start receiving the billings, receiving the financial revenues rather than subsidizing. But unfortunately, this implementation of the roadmap is delayed. And both Kosovo and Serbia have their share of responsibilities for that. So we are focusing on the implementation of this energy roadmap, because a month from now, tentatively 15th of October, is the beginning of the heating season in Kosovo. If we do not have this in order, Kosovo says they will no longer pay for the Serbs. We might have a real problem, real humanitarian, social, and political problem. So, as I said, we need to deal with these issues which are distracting us from focusing on what is the priority, the normalization of relations. So this is our priority, and you have seen I visited Kosovo yesterday, and it was my 3rd visit in last 4 weeks. I'm in regular contact. I was in Belgrade twice in this period. I will see President Vučić next week in New York. I am in a daily contact with parties, because we don't need this crisis, and they also need to hear from all of you that there is a war in Ukraine. So we don't need another war in the Balkans, or conflict, or people being wounded and killed because of license plate. And also, once I have the floor, Davor, it's good to see you as well after some time. And well, we're speaking about actors. We should mention also the United States, and I should say that they are our best ally. They are very clear that the Western Balkans is the area where the European Union is in the lead, and they see their role in helping and assisting us. But this also means they expect our leadership. So they need to know there is something for them to support. So that's why what we do in the Western Balkans is not only between us, but it's also a message towards United States and other partners, whether we are able to be a global player, whether we are able to provide strategic vision and leadership, and then they will be happy to support us. If we fail, they will understand they have to do it without us. When it comes to Turkey and the Western Balkans, I don't want to comment on internal developments in Turkey. When it comes to the Western Balkans, I see Turkey as our partner and a relevant factor. I do not see negative influence of Turkey. Turkey cannot be disregarded, particularly in Bosnia and Herzegovina and in Serbia, but also, in Kosovo, but also all over the region. Turkey is a respected partner, and therefore, I really think that on the Western Balkans, we should treat them as our ally. Russia is greatly adding to the mess, using all the instruments they have, and we know that they are investing heavily into hybrid wars, financing the different media outlets, journalists, politicians, and spreading their narrative, or at least adding to the confusion. And they are not unsuccessful. We see it in the region. But they cannot offer what we offer, which is European perspective. So again, we should not be afraid of the third actors. We should be afraid of ourselves. And here I fully agree with Paolo. If we want to succeed, it cannot be effort here and there. The entire European Union, all the institutions we all need to understand that without full commitment, we will leave the Balkans to the third actors. And then we will have the Balkans which are less European, less democratic. But it will be only us to blame, not the third actors. They can only use as much space as we leave open for them. So let's not become overly worried about third actors. Let's be worried about all the unused potential, unused space that we can fill, but we've chosen not to. But Paolo, I do see lots of goodwill lately, last 2 years. I do see new awakening. I also see we still don't know what to do with it, how to translate this new understanding into a new quality. And my very, very last remark also to Davor, I think it would be worth looking into these proposals about the gradual integration. So bringing the parties at the table in our working bodies, step by step, increasing their de facto participation, so that it's not like now that everything comes with the membership. Let them feel that they are being treated seriously by us already at different stages of their accession process. I've been speaking for too long, so I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Not at all. Thank you very much, Mr. Lajcak. Paolo Rangel, would you like to react to this question as well?
Yes, indeed. Please. So, and I'll be very brief because due to the difference of hours, because here is still 10 o'clock and I have to go to Lisbon, I will be really very, very short. But let me say first that I fully support this approach that was suggested by Davor and now was, I'd say, also defended by Miroslav, that is a gradual integration. So we have to do that. And that is the way we can commit ourselves with the civil society, as Davor has suggested. Because one of the things that you see very, very, very clearly in this region, and especially, for instance, in my case in Bosnia-Herzegovina, is that there is a huge divorce between the civil society and the political leadership. So if you speak with the students, with the families, with the entrepreneurs, and so on, they are not really worried with the political, ethnic, religious issues that are always in the agenda of the political leaders. They would like to live better. They would like their children to have good studies. They would like to have a very good health service. They would like to have less migration towards Europe in order to have no brain drain and so on. So we need really to probably do some integration in some fields before a formal enlargement, because this is the only way of giving to the population directly a perspective of what are the advantages of becoming a member of the European Union. This is one thing. I am not very enthusiastic about this European political community that was suggested by President Macron, that will have their first meeting in the 6th of October. But I think that could be the platform to try to really do this kind of step-by-step integration with some anticipation of some of the fields and files where we can cooperate. Then going to the third actors. I would say that I fully agree that the United States, they are a strong partner. They are, in a certain way, even more active, committed, and good-willing to sometimes some leaders of the European Union, that, as I say, and they expect from us, they are totally ready to cooperate with us. Also United Kingdom, not with the same capacity, but these two actors, they are totally in our side. So they will support our efforts. By the way, let me praise the efforts of the High Representative in Bosnia-Herzegovina, because he has been very, very impartial. Everybody claims against him from all the parties, what is a very good sign, because it's a sign that he's doing the things in a very impartial way. Then let me say only this. Russia today, I think it's a lost partner here. I agree that Turkey is a necessary. We have to have here an understanding with Turkey, and they have also a tradition because of the Ottoman Empire and so on. So historically, these ties, and we really need to have also a common understanding. And I think that in this very respect, that is not that is a tower. I'd say. We can really have an understanding with them in this respect, even if I think that Turkey is further and further away from any European perspective, of course. But in this very respect, yes. But don't forget that there is another actor that is there, that is China. And if we look at what happened in Montenegro in the last 2 years, China is also there. And of course, it is with a different, not with this historical perspective that Russian Federation, European Union, Turkey have, but they are there in their geopolitical way of playing. And we should also address this. By the way, the reason why I was emphasizing that Turkey can have a role, but of course it's not an easy thing to do, but they can have, is because there are some not so strong third actors, but they are trying to, especially in Bosnia and Herzegovina and also in Kosovo and probably in Albania, they are acting, that is Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Iran, but especially Saudi Arabia and Qatar, because they have financial capacity. And this is a totally different influence from the influence of Turkey. So we should also be aware of this. And so when you look at the geopolitical picture, we should do that. I conclude with only stressing, underlining one thing that Miroslav said here. And by the way, I would like to thank him for his role all across these years, very much in the tradition of late Edvard Kukan, also from Slovakia. So Slovakia has here people that are really changing the lives of these populations in a very, very good way. But you said something that is crucial. That is, of course, that if European Union is present, is clearly present, other third actors that have, I'd say, a malignant or a negative influence, they will be, I'd say, contained. So they will retreat. The problem is sometimes our absence. I'm saying absence, of course, we are very present, but we should be even more in a very cooperative way, not imposing anything, but giving the signal, because if we are present, I think that some of the negative aspects and dimensions of these third actors' influences would be, I'd say, reduced in a significant way. And this message that Miroslav gave here, for me, is in what is our responsibility today as European Union, is the main message. If we engage really with a lot of will and strength and resolve, I think that some of the problems that we have today with third actors will be immediately solved by our presence. And I thank you very much, because I have really to go now. I have 300 kilometers ahead to a new conference at 1 o'clock here in Portugal. Thank you very much.
Paolo, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. And good luck. Mr. Hagleitner from the European Commission, would you like to reply to the question?
Yes, thank you very much. Briefly, Ambassador Stier, on roaming, I wanted to say a few words because it's a good example of how we're actually working with the region and trying to integrate them closer with the EU's internal market. We have helped them to conclude a regional roaming agreement, so that's happened, that is there. But we are now working with, well, actually, I can't say with them, it's mainly with the telecom operators, is to integrate them into the EU roaming-free zone. And we hope that we manage to agree with Sam to have these sort of reduction of roaming starting early next year, with having these tangible benefits. And I'm saying that because this is the way we are trying to as well work in other areas. First having regional integration amongst the six, and then based obviously on EU standards, and then on that basis building bridges to the EU single market. This is not sort of a panacea on the enlargement process, because in many ways the single market, the customs union, it's binary, you're in or out, unfortunately. But there are bridges that can be built, and this is what we're trying to do, and roaming is one of those examples. On the OHR in Bosnia, I would just, we of course we've seen the fact that he's taken decisions to overcome obstacles to elections, etc. I would just caution that again, in the long run, taking decisions by the international presence does not bring Bosnia closer to the European Union. That's not the long-term way to get closer to address the priorities in the opinion. I think the way this has to happen, it has to come from inside, and this new there are opportunities now. They have to be used, and they have to be used also from within the countries, and that's why it's important, as mentioned by a number of you, to work with the economic operators, with the business organizations who know the values and the importance of joining the union, of working with the civil society, in order to create also a new dynamic at that level from within the countries of the region, to push, in fact, their political leaders move forward on the path of accession. Because ultimately, of course, there's a geopolitical reality out there, and we have to, we must take account of that. But enlargement is a process which is based on norms and standards which the countries applying for EU membership have to work towards fulfilling. On this Commission side, we are obviously fully behind them and supporting them with financial, technical expertise, but the ultimate decisions need to come from within the countries themselves. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Second round of questions. The list is quite long, but the maximum I can take is 3 questions. So Eric Fabijanic from the Croatian Parliament, Claudius Maniokas, one of our experts, and then Emanuelis Zingeris from the Lithuanian Parliament. Mr. Fabijanic, please.
I would like just to make a point how in good direction the European Union goes in the last 30 years. When started the war in Croatia, like an aggression of Serbia, we were under embargo of importing arms to defend ourselves. 30 years after, the European Union helped Ukraine to defend herself, and not only in military, but even in humanitarian and other ways. I would just remark one thing, that in the Western Balkans we have different countries that have not all of them are committed to become a state member of the European Union. And looking in the same way, Kosovo and Serbia, to that, and imposing them to make their own arrangements and putting them on the same level, it's not so. I think it's not so fair. Because I think that Kosovo, as we heard today, is more committed than Serbia in this European traveling to a membership. We have another thing that is for many countries that are waiting for decades to enter in the European Union are now looking this fast track for Ukraine, and you have the increasing Europhobia in that countries. And I really hope that we don't make the same mistakes with the negotiation with that countries, because I remember one thing. The case of Gotovina. Gotovina, I think 4 or 5 years, put Croatia apart in the European integration, because we have to put him on trial. We were accused that we are hiding him in Croatia. He was in another part of the Europe, and after that, the Hague Tribunal proved that his innocence. I really want to be serious and to consider these countries more carefully that it was the integration of Croatia in the European Union. Okay.
Thank you very much. Next question, Claudius Maniokas. Claudio, if you are with us online, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Laima, for such an excellent conference.
About the solutions to the current issues in Western Balkans. And it was about two things, European political community and accelerated staged membership. But we were answered magically by Mr. Lajcek and others. So I would rather save time for my future presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Emanuelis Zingeris, member of the Lithuanian Parliament, please.
Yes, still member. My question is related to Poland, to Mr. Kamiński, who is for decades is most global active member of European Parliament and now is Vice Speaker of Senate of Poland. So in this case, it's about our European duties of our honorable countries. Lithuania took responsibility for Taiwan, strengthening the relations, you know in which way, having on our poor head reactions of People's Republic of China, now under European Union scrutiny, the Chinese economic reactions and World Trade Organization. Secondly, we harbor Belarusian opposition, here Russia opposition, and supported and blocked Cuba-European Union free trade agreement for the reason that no signs of changes in Cuba towards democracy. From our angle, Poland is the key morally responsible and morally advanced after such huge support to Ukraine, taking at homes more like 4 million immigrants, and having a huge European Union internal responsibilities. We are here based not only on European Union blue colors, we are based here on the responsibilities to all democratic world, shaping democratic world broader. So Balkans are one of the important heavy elements of that. How will be from your side to react about Polish mission? Our good friends mentioned Slovakia, mentioned other members of our region. From time to time, your government mentioning so-called Carpathian coalition in middle of Europe. But how it's about your A, European Union, and B, democratic world mission by the Poland, who is key regional power for us. And we're wondering when you will be joining those missions including even China against Chinese domination and other issues related to Cuba. Sir, it will be interesting to have your personal long-term experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emanuelis. My apologies to those who requested the floor and asked they wanted also to ask our speakers, but we simply are already terribly late. So now I will ask Michal Kaminsky to reply, and then Mr. Hagleitner, and then Mr. Lajcak.
So I would just, I don't want to take your time for too much, but thank you for the question, which is so actually broad that I'm not able to answer it in a short time, but I would like to add to this discussion from my Polish perspective, something which is for me, I think, crucial. We are talking about the integration of Western Balkans, but I think that the reason of the success of a Polish and Lithuanian and other countries' integration into the European Union was the fact, I mentioned in my previous intervention, that our societies shared the European values. And our European integration was based on a deepest interest of our nations, not only in becoming a part of a, let's say, a community of well-being, but also of a community of values. And when I see thousands or hundreds of thousands of Serbs on the streets of Belgrade who are supporting Russia invasion against Ukraine, and who are waving the Russian flags, and who are repeating the Russian propaganda in Serbia, I'm not a diplomat, I'm an elected politician for 25 years, so I have a courage to say it. I have doubts if the Serbian society really shared our European values. After the war in Ukraine, I think something changed in many of the societies. I can understand the historical reasons of a sympathy towards Russia in Serbia, but I see Kharkiv, a Russian-speaking city, I repeat, Russian-speaking city, in which the Russian-speaking population is murdered by Russian army. So I think that despite the fact that we all have some reasons to like some aspects of Russian history or culture, we have to admit that today Russia is a criminal nation and a criminal state, and whoever is supporting Russia is also actually taking part of the responsibility for the crimes Russia is committing. So that's my actually deepest concern about Balkans today, is the fact that inside of very important region of Europe, we have a country and a society which is sharing Russian values, which they are describing Russian mir, which is actually everything not mir, which means peace in Russian as well.
Thank you very much, Michal. Mr. Hagleitner, please.
Yes, if I can just add on the latest comment on common foreign and security policy, which I think indeed has taken more prominence, the alignment to EU foreign policy, and that this is not a matter anymore where diplomats calculated the percentages of alignment, but it has become a matter of choice in the current situation. I mean, I would just mention sort of the positive side of that is, of course, that we do have 3 countries that are fully aligned with the EU's positions and sanctions on Russia. That's Albania, Montenegro, and North Macedonia. We also have a higher alignment rate of Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo voluntarily aligned. Should also be recognized. So I think that's a bit the overall picture in the region. But of course, this is it is an issue of choice in the long run. I just to finish by thanking again the Lithuanian Parliament by giving despite the fact that the Russian war in Ukraine is very much present, that you really put the focus on enlargement in the wider sense, and also on the Western Balkans. As other speakers have said, this really is not the moment to deflect our attention as well from the Western Balkans, but to use this renewed impetus that is there for enlargement as such to really move ahead and work with the region to advance towards the goal of EU membership. So thank you very much again for having me here.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lajčák, please.
Yes, thank you very much. And very quickly, yes, we need to, as I said, translate our goodwill into a new quality and accelerated membership, gradual integration. We really need to think out of the box, because the business as usual will not get us where we want to get. So that's one thing. Second, on the European political community, well, there will be this first meeting on the 6th of October. What I want to say is that it's in our hand in a way. It was proposed by President Macron, but it's in the hand of participating states. So let's make sure it will be what we want it to be. And let's make sure it will not be what we don't want it to be. So let's make sure it will not be a permanent waiting room or the track to, the second class of countries. And I think all the countries that are invited to the meeting and to this community have their say. So that this is really important. And my final point is that, yes, the Russia's aggression against Ukraine stressed the political aspects of the European integration of the Balkans. It is a political and technical process. We were focused maybe too much on the technical parts. Now the political is clearly in the forefront, including the alignment. Alignment means sharing our values. So 100% alignment shows that countries are fully sharing our values, and they are adjusting their concrete policies, and this should be rewarded, and this should be marked. And speaking about the commitment to European values, look, the progress on the EU path is in the end of the day in the hands of the member states. It's the Council that makes the decisions based on Commission's proposals, and we can all see very clearly that member states are now very much looking also at the European integration of the Balkans against the backdrop of Russia's war against Ukraine. So they are judging the countries not by how many boxes have been ticked, but how much they align with our policies, how much they join our policies. So that means the countries know that how their position vis-à-vis Russia and vis-à-vis Ukraine has a very, very important impact on the future progress on the European path. And that's the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So to conclude this session, first of all, I wholeheartedly thank our speakers, Miroslav Lajčák, Paulo Rangel, Thomas Hagleitner, and Michal Kamiński, and also all participants of the conference who contributed to this session. And now we move, so thank you very much all. Thank you and good luck. Now we will start our expert panel about the trends of the European integration of Western Balkan countries and assessment of the membership prospects. We have three speakers. Hello, our participant from the North Macedonia. But if you would allow me, I would like to start with Claudius Maniokas. Dr. Claudius Maniokas from Lithuania, from a step, because he has to leave early. So, Claudio, the floor is yours. Please.
Thank you, Laima, very much. It's a pleasure. Sorry for this bit disturbance of the order. I'm so glad to speak after Mr. Lajčák, who outlined possible solutions to the issues of Western Balkans. And this is exactly my area as a technical expert and as a consultant with experience in almost all Western Balkan countries. I've spent really sometime longer in some than in others, but I think most of the issues are pretty the same. So I can only, rejoin all others who claimed the process has become too long and a bit unfruitful with respect to progress, what all parties are aiming to achieve. Recently, we have calculated basically the procedural administrative burden, let's put it this way, of the accession process. Just starting from the screening, what Albania and North Macedonia started yesterday officially, the process now takes 13 stages and 72 steps. 7-2. It starts, from exploratory screening, then bilateral screening, then screening reports, opening benchmarks, opening of the clusters, interim benchmarks, closing benchmarks, and so on and so on. And for then countries like Montenegro, it took already 10 years of negotiations. So this process has become really too complex, and it has to be simplified, and new dynamism, which has been brought also by Russian aggression in Ukraine, but most of all EU's robust response to this, really requires simplification of this procedure. Currently, there is a bit of a game of catch me if you can. So both parties are trying to pretend, they are fulfilling all the procedural steps, but the substantial progress is scarce. I was glad quite a lot of speakers, including Mr. Lajčák, spoke for possible solutions, which are increasingly in the air, and increasingly enjoying the support of many experts and officials and some member states. So this is about partial or staged membership, rather staged membership, meaning what really after a certain advancement in the process of technical and political adjustment, there should be more benefits of the EU brought to the aspiring countries. So, indeed, I was also glad to hear it yesterday in the official opening of the screening process with Albania and North Macedonia. The really accelerated integration in certain areas was mentioned. So probably there is a need to design, this more carefully, to think about what can be offered. But we have not to forget that this is also about the resources. And then not only Western Balkans, but also Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia will require then more resources, more investment into this staged membership, into the benefits of the EU membership. So, indeed, we need to adopt a more serious attitude after this renewed commitment and really response to the Ukrainian war by designing it more dynamic, less heavy procedural process of the EU accession. So this is my main message. I was really enjoying today's discussion and looking forward to participating in the future. Now I'm sorry I have to leave to another event. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claudio, very much for being with us and for your insights. And now I will give the floor to Dr. Malinka Ristevska-Yordanova from the Institute, European Policy Institute in Skopje, North Macedonia. Please.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much for the invitation, for this opportunity to share our views with you. I will, in the end of in the last panel, maybe a bit change the lenses from macro to macro plan and bring you more to the south, since North Macedonia, well, in North Macedonia, but more to the south, since this was only this was not the focus until now in the conference. So when the EU officials, the member states speak about the opening of negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia, the views and the narratives are quite divergent from the independent sources and independent thinkers, think tanks, and so on, not only Macedonian, which, let's say, we might be biased, but also EU-based think tanks. Why? Because the specific deal that was offered to Macedonia in order to open the negotiations, the so-called...
Ms. Ristevska, hello, can you hear me? We do not see you on the screen. Can you check, please, your camera?
Yes.
If it's on.
It's on, but...
It's on. Okay, we will... very good.
Okay.
Yes, we see you. Okay, please.
Okay, so this French deal that was accepted by the Macedonian government was very much criticized by the independent think tanks, also EU-based, but also very difficult to accept by the Macedonian public. In fact, most of the Macedonian citizens did not accept it. What is seen in the official language as a compromise was seen as a blackmail in an imbalanced position in which Bulgaria was and is still using its position of a member state. Why? Because the French deal has a specific added condition, which is introducing bilateralization in the accession negotiations, and these are mechanisms to implement the friendship agreement between Macedonia and Bulgaria. And this is a precedent in enlargement. The negotiating framework is different. It's also different from Albania. The accession negotiations practically, formally, have not opened. They should be officially opened only once Macedonia changes its constitution and inserts the Bulgarian minority in it. All of this has created Macedonia in the country a perception that the price for opening negotiations is too high. Since we already paid quite some prices changing our name because of the deal with the Prespa agreement with Greece, and were convinced at that point that this should be the end of the bilateral conditions, but now we receive new conditions. Now, what the key issue is? The key issue is first of all whether this process will be implemented, whether it will be continued, since politically at the moment there is no majority in the parliament, qualified majority in the parliament for the changing of the constitution. The fact is that the political polarization is quite high, but it's not only political polarization, there is also risk for the delicate interethnic balance in the country that has been kept for quite long. Now, what we see at the forefront of the process are the bilateral conditions with Bulgaria, and we do not see what the Europeanization part of the process, the standards, the EU acquis, the values, to the forefront. The bilateral issues are totally preoccupying the national political scene, but also the public discourse. And this is an issue, and it's a big issue of how the process will go forward, which conditions will prevail, especially that some of the conditions contradict each other and contradict European standards. Some of the speakers previously noted that Macedonia is a positive example. It has taken the right side with 100% alignment with the common foreign and security policy. This is true. It is praised as one of the compliant countries with the EU, although of course there are many challenges in the reforms, especially in this political constellation with clear divisions on the bilateral issue with Bulgaria. So the effect of the deal as it was done in the country at the moment is not positive. It is rather negative. It leads to further political polarization, and it can jeopardize the reforms, especially in the fundamental sector. So what will prevail, we shall see. But the issue is that there is a competition between these embedded conditions in the negotiating framework, something that has not been the case for any of the countries before, something that is not the case with Albania, which is in the same group formally now. The impact regionally, well, you can already guess. In the region, the information is shared. This information is very much in the focus of the public in the whole region. So the question very often posed is, look, what happened to Macedonia, North Macedonia? They fulfilled the conditions, and what did they get? They only got new conditions. So none of the commitments were previously fulfilled. So the narrative, the official narrative is one. But then you have the public discourse and the narratives in the backgrounds that are quite different. And the message that gets to the public is, if this happens to Macedonia, if it's compliant, what can the others expect? If the EU accepted the Bulgarian conditions, never, although it's called compromise, what will happen with the countries that are next in the row? There are already such issues posed that some of the countries might pose other bilateral issues to the candidates. What does it mean strategically? The trust in the EU in Macedonia now is as its historic low. Is it that Russia has gained trust? No, the US has gained more trust. But that is the effect. The credibility has not been regained with this move, the formal opening of the first phase of negotiations. So the real issue is what can really motivate or lead to sustainable reforms in a situation when not only the citizens, but some of the key actors are disillusioned about the prospects and the credibility. Something that could be very reassuring, I would say that if in the future the bilateral issues keep prevailing, then there will be that the process will not only be challenged, there will be no real reform process despite even having formal accession negotiations, even if the constitution is changed, and it can only be changed by pressure at this moment, since the opposition already proclaimed that it will not vote for, and the majority right now has a very thin majority. So thank you for now. I'm very aware that I have brought in some divergent views, and I will be glad to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much for your remarks, for your expertise. Our next speaker is Lina Strupinskienė from the Institute of International Relations and Political Science of the University of Vilnius. Lina, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for your kind invitation. It's always a little bit hard to be the last person to speak in a conference that hosted so many distinguished guests and who all talked about the very same topic, the Western Balkan integration into the EU. I'd like to keep my presentation brief and to focus on a narrower topic that has always been at the background of these discussions, that is the Russian influence in the Western Balkans in the context of the war in Ukraine. And I'd like to focus only on 3 countries. Unfortunately, none of their representatives are here today nor joined us online. The countries where Russian influence was most prominent even before the war started and was very visible during this period in the last 6 months. So that would be Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Montenegro. So faced with the war in Ukraine, Serbia sent a very controversial and contradictory message. On one hand, it began with the official condemnation of aggression. It did join the UN General Assembly resolution condemning the aggression. It did say that it respects Ukraine's territorial integrity. However, at the same time, it refused to join the EU sanctions, which was a topic that was heavily discussed among the politicians and among the experts. And President Vučić initially was believed to maybe say this because of an active electoral campaign. However, the electoral campaign came and went, and he still stuck to this position, claiming that the public opinion is behind him, which indeed seems to be the case, as Mr. Putin is the most popular foreign politician in Serbia, and about 80% of the population, according to the latest Demostat polls, are in support of not joining the EU sanctions for Russia. And Mr. Vučić also constantly stresses that Serbia hasn't yet opened Chapter 31, so they're not under a duty of full alignment with EU foreign and security policy. They only have to gradually align, gradually come close to that. But we see that this was not an obstacle for other states who are neither negotiating nor, even holding a potential candidate status. So this is really a good indication of a political will of the country to actually go this difficult path towards the EU integration. And unfortunately, the media landscape, which is also, of course, affected by the politicians and gives them additional arguments and tools, is pro-Russian and very favorable for Russia in Serbia. Even at the moment when it seems that there are very many positive developments at the Ukrainian front, if you see the leading websites in Serbia, they all say there's been a tactical retreat, or this is just a tiny part of a bigger plan where Russia is going to prevail, and they keep on minimizing the losses that have been done at the moment. So it is definitely a troubling and problematic case. And this has been a part of a long-standing tradition of balancing between East and West. This is their foreign policy tradition since Vučić took power. It is supported by the population. However, it is not sustainable in the long run. And if Serbia still wants to be a part of the EU family, it will have to eventually decide with whom it's going to go, no matter the cost. And at the same time, of course, certain guarantees from the side of the EU and certain assistance in diminishing this dependency, especially in the energy sector, are also important. But the political will has to be there, and it doesn't seem that it is there, unfortunately, at the moment. The situation is somewhat similar in Bosnia, primarily in Republika Srpska, definitely not in the Federation. And this is also one of the reasons why Bosnia hasn't joined the sanctions and hasn't fully aligned itself with the EU foreign policy. And the country is hampered by one political crisis after another. I think you are all very well aware of the more recent one that started last summer, when outgoing OHR, Mr. Valentin Inzko, imposed a genocide denial ban, which very much angered the Bosnian Serb representatives, especially Milorad Dodik, who's now running again for Republika Srpska president position, and he might just win and continue his plans. And he. Once this happened, once the genocide denial ban was implemented, Milorad Dodik announced plans for secession and took active steps in actually creating alternative institutions, stopped paying money to the country's budget, and seemed to have caused a very serious crisis. It is interesting that the war in Ukraine actually delayed his plans, and one of the main reasons probably is the fact that Russia cannot so easily provide unsupervised military assistance to Dodik and cannot support his activities at the moment because it is busy on the front line, and it's harder to do that unobserved. But the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina is also complex due to these divisions and political crises that keep on shaking the country. And these crises definitely fall straight into the hands of Russia, which has a very clear interest in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It wants to be a part of any decisions that touch upon the country's future, from closing the OHR office to Euro-Atlantic integration to electoral laws to constitutional reforms and whatever it may be. So the final result of this war that we have in our neighborhood will definitely have a direct impact on Putin's ambitions in the Balkans and in Bosnia. If Russia loses or signs a peace deal that's not to its liking, then its impact and influence will be diminished. And if not, we will see more troublesome events in Bosnia and Herzegovina and probably in Kosovo as well. Talking about Montenegro, Montenegro has historically maintained close cultural and religious ties with Russia. There's also a very large pro-Russian Serb minority in the country. 1/3 of the population is Serb. Russia is the largest foreign investor in Montenegro, especially in tourism and real estate. However, its foreign policy is completely different from Serbia. Montenegro is a EU candidate country. It expressed its willingness to join back in 2008, started negotiations in 2012, and since the outbreak of war, it has aligned its foreign policy with that of the EU. It has closed off its airspace, expelled Russian diplomats, adhered to sanctions, and ended up on the list of unfriendly countries, just like we did. And this is a good list to be on, I'd say. However, there's also trouble in Montenegro, and any reform or important political action and even further steps of how to actually implement the sanctions are hampered by a political crisis. It started a couple of years back when President Đukanović, DPS party, lost the elections. It has been ruling the country for 30 years. And a rainbow coalition was formed, mainly with the aim to dismantle the autocratic style of governance and corruption practices of Milo Đukanović, but it didn't last long. A new minority government was formed very recently. It lasted even shorter, and it fell in August this year, so just 2 months ago. So we'll see what happens next, and it's just a more recent example of raising tensions between these two positions, like pro-West, pro-Russian, and pro-European and anti-European. So it is a problematic situation at the moment, and the opposition to DPS is very much politically divided and is weak, so I'm doubting if they can raise a strong alternative. So we might see the next government also comprised of the DPS. Good news is that it is pro-Western. but with a certain baggage that comes together with that. So to conclude, the Western Balkans region, especially now, is a clear example of a field of competition between the East and the West. And the war in Ukraine, the outcome of the war in Ukraine will definitely have an impact on Russian influence in the region. If Russia wins, then we're going to have more problems over here, and if not, its influence and impact will be diminished. And also, what the war in Ukraine made clear is that EU has more political will and more interest in enlargement, which is great news for the Western Balkans. The recent granting of the candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova shows that EU is willing to think about enlargement in more creative ways. So that is an opportunity that could be seized by the region, and I wish it all the best, especially for those who are actually doing complicated political decisions in order to be on this path. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Strupinskiene. I do not see anybody, raising the hand. Yes, Kristijonas Bartoševičius, member of the Lithuanian Parliament, please.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I couldn't participate in the first part of this wonderful conference, and thank you for all the participants. And I really put the remarks on several questions, so maybe Mr. Strupinskiene might answer them. So you talk about the Balkan region and about this influence of Russia. So the question is what you've just said. What do you think? Would the view towards Russia and EU from these Western Balkan countries, did it change? Did the war of Ukraine help the Western Balkan countries to change the view and try to change their image in the eyes of the EU towards the Russia?
Maybe in a way, but not really, because you see that in those countries where Russian influence was strong before the war, it kept on being strong even during the war. And despite the criticism from EU institutions, countries like Serbia still continue more or less doing business as usual. So not so much. Maybe it helped for people who are not so much involved in politics, but who have lived through a very traumatic experience during the wars on a very human level, to feel sympathy for Ukrainian refugees, to feel the horrors of the people who suffer. And even in Serbia, many people found refuge, actually running away from Russia. And even working with political NGOs that take care of civil society initiatives. They found home in Serbia because it's visa-free, first of all, and it's not anti-Russia, but it doesn't mean that they cannot continue their political activities there, which they cannot at the moment in Serbia.
Thank you very much, Lina. Unfortunately, due to the time constraints, I have to conclude the session. So thank you, Valdas Rakutis. Would you like to ask our speakers, our experts?
Thank you very much.
Valdas Rakutis, member of the Lithuanian Parliament, please.
Thank you very much, colleagues, taking time for one last question. But it's the most important is what to have to do. Situation is changing. We talk about competition between West and East, but West is not participating in competition, but is waiting on the finish line. Really, how to change such a mainstream of brains? Yes, because when we talk about rebuilding of Ukraine, but the war is not over. And what also can happen is that the Balkans became part of this conflict, maybe not in military way, but in influence way. And the tensions are very important. And we hear about very negative tensions about mobilization of societies, pro-Russian societies, on the flags of Putin, and some steps have to be done and quick. Importance of time is very important. We live in long-lasting peace. In our brains, too long. Yes, and now when we have a conflict, we have to make some new kind of policy here. Yes, so it's recommendations. What we have to do is the most important question now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. Istevska, would you like, please, the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, the issue is that because of solidarity between member states, because of the principle of anonymity in common foreign and security policies, unfortunately, you have sacrificed some EU values. And this has the cost of this is the loss of credibility of the EU in the region. How it will be regained, if the rules are not changed, then the political balance must be changed. So within the EU, you have to give us the example of, or reconvince us in the EU values. EU values in Macedonia are not now the most popular word, believe me, because simply credibility is lost. So within the situation as it is now, take more interest in the issues. I know, Macedonia is a small country, let's take a small step, go to the next step, as Claudius says, out of 72 steps, everyone can be a success, but there is no sustainability in this process. It's simply too long, it's simply too complicated, it's obvious that there is not a unique political will on the EU member states to accelerate the process, and even through differentiated integration, but this is now a new theme, to accelerate the process within the current methodology with some more political will, and it's obviously will take a lot to convince some member states. I think that pretending further on, even after 30 years, that we are doing something will just do more harm. So we have to stop pretending that we are doing it. We are not doing it. Let's look at the concrete examples. We are not doing it. The people in the Western Balkans do not believe in it. And it's not about a matter of belief or feeling. The problem is that the process of Europeanization should bring more pressure from the citizens towards their governments and on the governments to do EU-related reform, to do the fundamentals as they should, to do the complex processes. Now we don't have that push because the other conditions and the other considerations are in the forefront. So back to credibility and try to simplify the process on the ground, because what is happening now, formally looking at it, it's complex. But when you go into practice, with all the compromises made, it's even worse. It has to be simplified in practice. It can be done politically, because if you now change the rules, it will lead to more and more renegotiation. And when we talk about concrete steps of integration, yes, an example, we are talking about roaming. We were talking about roaming text 10 years ago and directly with the EU. Of course, what happened was 5 years, 6 years of introducing regional no roaming area. And now it will be convincing the EU operators for the next 3 or 4, and just in one area. How much does it cost the EU to integrate the Western Balkans into the market? What's the cost? What's the cost of non-integrated, at least in the EU market? There are some bigger questions that have to be posed here. Thank you. We don't have time.
Thank you very much. Lina Strupinskaya, please.
Well, I think everybody agrees that the process of EU integration has to be merit-based. We've heard it numerous times, and there is a general consensus that this is the way it's supposed to look like. However, very often the merit is words of compliments, right? Well done, good job, you go. And then the punishment you get is negative comments and condemnation, very terrifying thing, right? We condemn you. But the new enlargement methodology actually offers certain tools, right, that we could use and we could look more creatively at. And I was very glad that members from the representatives of the European Commission, representatives of the European Parliament were already talking about this idea of gradual integration, right, that we could talk about actual benefits and actual punishments for progress and for lack of progress and tie it with more or less participation in decision-making, more or less participation in or access even to structural funds or something. So it has to be tangible and take off the drama of the zero-sum game when you're talking about only two options, non-member and full-on member. So these creative ways of thinking about integration could be a solution and could help reconvince the people in the Balkans that this is the right way to go, as they will feel the benefits, as students from Kosovo could travel to any country on Erasmus, for example, and scholars could move around, and we could compete for the same funds for doing research and things like that. So I see this as one of the ways forward.
Thank you. So we conclude the session. Thank you very much, Dr. Malinka Ristevska-Jordanova, for joining us from Skopje. Thank you, Lina Strupinskienė, for being here in person in Vilnius, and Claudius Maniokas, who joined us online. And now we move to concluding remarks. And I kindly invite my dear colleague, Emanuelis Zingeris, member of our parliament and the longest-serving member of the Foreign Affairs Committee in this Parliament and former chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee immediately after Lithuania restored its independence. Emanuele, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Lema, looking to your description, I become an elderly...
I can say even more. I can say even more.
Elderly person. I was youngest and become oldest. My goodness, during the last 3 decades, it's... in 1 minute, in 1 second happens. So about our enthusiastic approach, why we are doing that, looking to all your marvelous contribution today, and looking to Lema, saying to her, thank you all those years in European Parliament, and especially now, currently being chairman of Foreign Affairs Committee, 32 years being in Foreign Affairs Committee, recognizing Armenia first, recognizing, I don't know, we produce here permanent nuclear power plant of revolutions, especially against Soviet Union. I remember in the 90s, we were so, overbooked with our experience horrors of Soviet Union, who invaded us, and we were not a part. And I would like to say friendly, we tested our blood every day. We become or not like them, like Soviet Russians, and we tried not to be part of their reality. I don't know how I was feeling in Tito time, but here was in the little Baltics, not Balkans, Baltics. We always mixed with some countries, Baltics and Balkans. In the Baltics was distance to all those red flags, posters, Pieteletskas, all this terrible, not our experience. So our Baltic people, when it was opened the way, it was done our revolutions in the 90s, as soon as possible, ran away to the directions of the West, European Union and NATO. And now if you go to polls, I would like to say, it looks for you probably a little bit crazy, European Union and NATO are most popular entities here. Still, after 18 years of our membership, still Union is extremely popular. I don't know what our good friend and freedom fighter Kamiński will say about Poland, but here Union is extremely popular and our membership is popular. So, but we should conclude something. Conclude is about what dear friend Vice Speaker Kamiński said about red line after February 24, even for the friendly Balkans. How we can be like nothing happened? Well, all conventions are broken after 24th of February. Children, women killed, smashed cities in Ukraine. It's a red line even for Serbian friends. So Lima invited on all our behalf our Serbian friends to be part of this second annual conference. They doesn't agree for the reason of Kosovo, but probably they're not sharing our enthusiastic approach towards NATO and Union. But we cannot be neutral after 24th of February. So in this case, all mentioned words, even by the last experts about Serbia, was right. Now we are on other positions. It's not like before 24th of February. We're asking Serbia to overview their relations to Russia and China for the reason that democratic world now have new exam to be really united against aggressors. Yesterday, a meeting between Chairman Xi and Mr. Putin trying to create allianship against democracies is our obligation to answer to that with new, absolutely new challenges. So union is a part, not only, not only Lina merit-based small homeworks done in the field of law, changes of law towards European Union. But the general geopolitical orientation become more important. Well, it's not East and West, it's freedom and captivity. So I would like to remember, and probably Mr. Kamiński remember our conference here on the 2013, when we invited for association agreement Mr. Yanukovych, Moldova and Georgia. Moldova, Georgia signed the agreement, and Mr. Yanukovych said to us, no, and looking to the leaders of 31 countries in the face, telling, Sha, I'm speaking with him, means Mr. Putin. So I'm speaking with Mr. Putin. He is not allowing me to join association agreement with European Union, openly, to the public. And then Vitaly Klitschko declared Maidan here in this room, told no, impeachment to the President Yanukovych, goal of Ukraine is European Union, and mean the declared target of Russia that for the reason of NATO, they attacked Ukraine is not true. It's artificial. They attacked for the reason of Western orientation of Ukraine, of Union, of European Union. That is the real reason. Well, that means freedom. I would like to add something very concretely to that. For Kosovo, we would like to see as the visa waive regime like it was done for Ukraine. You remember 1 year after they signed final association agreement, Lima, it was about 2014, when Ukraine joined the visa waive. We would like to invite all of you to create, in the Balkans too, our honorable speakers, to invite our all energy to go and to share with Kosovo at least free wave regime for opening the borders for them. That's strange that only one region was excluded. Kosovo was excluded from that, from all honorable Balkan countries. Secondly, we would like to add, to say what was just said. We hope that even China will be in your Balkan vision, not to let them become a political dictating partner And I was looking to Dever and to your achievements finally, with some delay in Dubrovnik, when you finally ended the LNG terminal there after huge debate inside of all parties, including the ruling party. But finally you did it. So to be independent from energy point of view in the Balkans, very important business to be. You cannot be independent like on the moon, but you should be at least to be independent, not let to dictate you and to be on the hook. What happened, I'm sorry to say, with some European and Western European countries. It's not the best example for our European Union integration to be dependent on energy. So coming back to the very concrete our proposals, it's, of course, visiting with Lima, Germany, just 1 month before, German parliament and very high responsible officials, we heard some rumors. It was shared with us Ukraine, Moldova, it was probably Georgia and the Vizier, but not, for some reasons, a little bit put it back, Caucasian Georgia. But it was rumors about Balkans even before this last summit. And we heard, mentioned some countries to be not candidate status, but on their way to be candidate status. So you are inside of our top level discussions, Balkan countries who would like to become, to have candidate status. And we were absolutely admitting Albanians and North Macedonians' efforts and contributions to their homeworks, in the field of homeworks to European Union. And we would like, from a Baltic point, probably from Polish point too, to support their future political negotiations during the upcoming months and years from our Baltic side. And probably from our friends in the Middle Europe, from Poland too. So last, I would like to say that European Union integration of Balkans is the best simple answer to Russia. She tried, just was said, to increase their influence in the Balkans with all possible means. With all possible means. And we should increase the speed. We should speed up with Western Balkan integration, and that's clear that this speed is not enough from our point of view. This whole conference was behind, all this conference was our political will to create enough powerful political lobby group to increase the speed of your integration. That was the goal of last two conferences. So from my point of view, I would like to conclude saying thank you to Lima for her incredible service in the field of Balkans. I was humble rapporteur on Montenegro for 3 years in monitoring committee of Council of Europe, and I would like to say Montenegro, even just mentioned by you during last governmental crisis, did some homeworks, and we have great hopes in Montenegro future too. Not looking of internal turbulences, but they did a lot of homeworks and merit-based moves. So I would like to say that the conference related to our political will to speed up your integration happens. Very sorry that our Serbian friends not understanding our openness. You just said, talking about Lina remarks, that a lot of Russians who probably are even democratically minded now landing in Serbia, but we cannot allow for ourselves after Russian military invasion full scale. Of course, after 2014, Crimea annexation, but these mass killings, mass graves, are taking us to a position that we would like to ask Serbia and, of course, Republika Srpska, instead of neighboring state of Serbia, to be up to the international law, up to the real humane attitudes and to human rights standards, And our questions are not geopolitical, it's inside of the history of the humanity. My mother passed away, she spent 4 years in Nazi camp, and she told me, she was beaten by Nazis, she was a Jewish person, arrested by Gestapo, and she told me, our love in the camp survived, not Hitler's hatred. So we should be based on the human attitudes, and from that point of view, we're embracing our European Union perspective for the Balkans. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emanuelis, very much. Thank you very much for your concluding remarks. And I have to conclude this conference, our second annual conference on Western Balkan countries on the path to the European Union. I hope that next year we will have the third conference on the same issue, and we will be, happy to discuss the further progress made by the countries of the region towards their membership in the European Union, because we all understand the strategic importance of the region, and also that the European project is not completed until Western Balkan countries are not in the EU, because it's about our stability, it's about our security, of the, not only, I'm speaking this time, not only about European Union, but also about Europe as such. Then we see what we see in the region. It's this fight, which is visible everywhere now, not only after Russia started new wave of aggression, brutal aggression against Ukraine on the 24th of February. I have in mind autocracies versus democracies. And we cannot, I appeal now to our colleagues, members of parliaments, representatives of the governments in the Western Balkan countries, we cannot give up. Democracies should prevail. Democracy should prevail. Because this would, give us a lot of hope. And not only hope, this would guarantee stability and security in Europe. So thank you all. I would like to thank all our speakers who participated in this conference, also members of parliaments who participated online. Thank you for your contributions, your questions, and your comments. Thank you, Emanuelis, once again for your concluding remarks, and my special thanks go to a delegation who is here in Vilnius today, delegation of the Croatian Parliament. Thank you, Davor Stier. Thank you, Eric Fabianic, and the representative of the Embassy of Croatia in Lithuania. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Ambassador, our Ambassador to Croatia, Jūratė Ragutskienė, everybody who contributed to the success of this conference. So thank you and good luck, and see you next year.